Chapter 941. The dusky abyss was filled with an austere atmosphere. The corpses of a group of people from the Yang realm were lying here, and their blood dyed the void red. The white-clothed woman was bright, beautiful, and otherworldly. She was like a celestial fairy that had descended into the world, and her bearing was peerless. In the battle not long ago, she actually swept through the enemies in all directions with a single sword in hand and awed the netherworld. She was beautiful and transcendent. If not for the divine sword in her hand still dripping blood, it would be hard to imagine that such a woman could look down on the world with such shocking strength. In the Een realm universe, everyone was shocked, and their hearts received a strong impact. The Yang realm's Godwalker had been killed in this universe. The big black yak and the others in the distant starry sky jumped up immediately. They waved their fists and roared loudly. Good kill. They felt the blood in their bodies boiling. Previously, they had been stifled to the point of suffocation. There was a breath of depression in their chests that they were unable to let out. Now, as the ancient Yao Yao's physical body made its move, she started a massacre and swept through this group of people from the Yang realm who considered everything beneath their notice. This made many people in the Een realm excited. In the end, they shouted out loudly. An emotion that had been suppressed for a long time rushed out of his chest, allowing him to finally vent his anger. At the edge of the universe, the remaining people in the chaos felt as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. They felt a chill from head to toe. What kind of experience was this? Just a moment ago, they were still looking down at the universe of the pond, but in the blink of an eye, everything was reversed. Even the incarnation of their god walking in the world was killed. At this moment, both Jiang Zhou and Su Hong had fainted. Blood flowed out of their 7 orifices, and they couldn't move at all. Cracks had appeared on their cores, and they couldn't move at all. The old weasel shouted, "Quick, let's go. There are many inexplicable dangers in this broken nether universe. I don't want to stay here a moment longer. Let's go to the chaotic universe." It was extremely uneasy. It had already been injured during the process of deduction, and not long ago, it had been entangled by strands of a strange substance. It had long been terrified. The face of the old divine expert sitting on the praying mat also became pale. He didn't dare to make any more deductions. He also felt an intense uneasiness, and for some reason, he felt a bit of fear. They unanimously decided to retreat into the chaotic universe. There was a Tao body of the Taiwu Heavenly Lord overseeing it there. It could resolve everything. Who could resist it? Only by retreating there could they feel at ease. Lady, she was trapped in the cabin, but she already knew what was going on. She immediately laughed happily, and she was probably the only one who could laugh at this moment. Go! The crimson ship set off and quickly rushed into the primal chaos. They didn't want to stay even a moment longer. They kept feeling that this Een realm universe was too cold. Goosebumps rose on their bodies as they fled quickly. No matter what, even if the sky collapsed, there would be someone to hold it up. The Empyrean incarnation was in front, so they could just report it truthfully. Behind him, in the hazy fog, a mass of gray fog appeared and turned into a hideous ghost face. It smiled coldly and directly followed. Outside the great abyss, that woman stood there quietly, exceptionally ethereal. There were bloodstains left behind from the archaic era on her white clothes, and the mother gold divine sword in her hand was dripping with blood, giving her a unique aura. Her beauty was astonishing and unconventional. "Yao Yao, is that you?" Chu Feng spoke with a slightly trembling voice. Yao Yao had disappeared for a long time and had yet to truly return even now. However, this person who looked exactly the same was clearly her. At the same time, he thought of what Yao Yao had said. Although she had been killed in the ancient war, she was wearing the number 1 battle robe back then and had fallen into the abyss. It should be the person in front of him. Yao Yao had come to find her old physical body. How was it now? Not to mention Chu Feng, even the black yak, yellow cow, and the others were incomparably nervous. They really wanted to know if the present Yao Yao was in this physical body. Every race in the universe also wanted to investigate. At the same time, the Black Yak, Old Donkey, and the others were about to activate the demonic ancestral cauldron and rush over here. However, Chu Feng stopped them immediately. "She's the body I left behind from the ancient times." The woman in white spoke. Her voice was very soft and intermittent. This was Yao Yao, who had found the physical body she had fallen into the great abyss back then. Her outcome in that battle was very miserable. Only her obsession had escaped. Although her physical body was almost destroyed, her spirituality wasn't extinguished. Her flesh and blood were reconstructed and she landed here. It could only be said that Yao Yao's body was too extraordinary. Out of a kind of instinct, she passively operated the robbery induction breathing technique. Now, the scene was astonishing and a hazy consciousness was born. It was just that this soul light was somewhat terrifying. Although it was ignorant of worldly affairs and didn't understand the principles of the human world, its self-protection consciousness was too strong. It almost obliterated Yao Yao's present soul light. At the same time that Chu Feng was happy and excited for Yao Yao, he also felt afraid. How could a hazy consciousness nourished from a physical body be so terrifying? Was it because this place was too special or because this physical body was too extraordinary? And could the hazy consciousness that appeared in this physical body still be considered Yao Yao's? Could it be that there were two Yao Yao now? Which one was she? Now, Yao Yao was faced with an extremely terrifying problem. She couldn't control this physical body and was rejected by the soul light that was born afterward. The latter wanted to obliterate her. She retreated to various parts of this body and temporarily lay dormant. She didn't have the chance to control her former body, and this time, she was only risking her life to exert influence. Now, she couldn't control herself anymore. After saying this, her eyes became increasingly lack. The woman in white swallowed the cosmic energy and the essence of the sea of stars. She closed her eyes and began to slowly sink into the great abyss. She was about to leave this place. Yao Yao. Chu Feng was very worried. When he first heard this, he was still happy for Yao Yao, but now he was so worried. The hazy soul light that was born after the ancient Yao Yao's physical body was a great threat. Bang! In the primal chaos, the large vermilion ship braving the wind and waves encountered another black warship with a celestial venerable's decree stuck to it. "Why did you guys retreat?" someone on the large black ship asked. There were 3 figures standing at the bow of the ship. They were still god-rank evolvers. This time, the Yang realm had really mobilized on a large scale. Some ancient orthodoxies had paid a great price to open up a path, so naturally, they wanted to obtain something. After a simple exchange, both parties knew what had happened. The old weasel and the others sped up and left to report to the Supreme Marshal Celestial Venerable, and the remaining 3 powerhouses all had grave expressions. They weren't willing to take the risk. But when they thought of the Celestial Venerable's dignified face and the special instructions, they braced themselves and set off. They were afraid that they would be punished if they missed that artifact. If the Celestial Venerable blamed them, even if it was only to be suppressed for 500 years, it would be a fate worse than death. They wanted nothing more than to be killed. The Lord of the 6 Southern Dipper stars is dead. We can each evolve 2 stars and try to surround and kill her. Time is of the essence. We absolutely can't let that artifact fall into the abyss. Otherwise, we really won't have a chance. They were afraid that Chu Feng would harden his heart and sink the Yang realm's treasure into the abyss forever. They traveled at top speed. Before long, the outside of the abyss shook once more. 6 figures appeared and lined up in the Yang realm's 6 Southern Dipper stars. Each of them was blossoming with glaring runes. These were the 6 great incarnations of the 3 powerhouses. Each of them could transform into 2 at most. Unfortunately, they had overestimated the power of an ancient domain like the 6 Southern Dipper stars to control death. This was the Een realm, so they couldn't unleash that kind of killing power. A beam of white light rushed up. The hazy soul light in Yao Yao's ancient physical body was enraged. Out of self-preservation and a kind of instinct, it attacked out. Chi chi chi. Sword chi was ever-changing. Divine radiance rushed into the sky as heads flew up one after the other. All 6 of them were beheaded. The so-called 6 Southern Dipper stars were hacked to death in the end, and their blood splashed outside the abyss. This place was peaceful. Those who came were all corpses. No one could match her under the heavens. This was everyone's first recognition. The white-clothed woman in the abyss was too stunning. She actually killed everyone from the Yang realm. Some people shouted enthusiastically. Would anyone from the Yang realm still dare to come over? They really hoped that the white-clothed woman could end this time's blood and chaos. Goddess of War. She's clearly a war immortal. The people were in heated discussion. They had given out such a title because they were suppressed by those from the Yang realm. Now that someone could kill a god's incarnation, how could they not be excited? However, some of the famous people who had survived from ancient times were frowning because they could see that the white-clothed woman was unstable. Her gaze was unfocused and lifeless. They were worried that she couldn't leave that place and couldn't protect the entire sea of stars. At this moment, the great vermilion ship with the Empyrean's decree stuck to it had already crossed the sea of primal chaos. After experiencing the lightning tribulation, the ship's body was seriously damaged. In order to speed up and rush over as soon as possible, the old weasel and the others didn't hesitate to pay any price. The Empyrean's decree stuck to the ship was burning and turning into flames. They rushed into the broken primal chaos universe at an inconceivable speed. Reporting. After they crossed over, they roared loudly and sent a message to the great Martial Empyrean. They told him that they found an ultimate ancient object from the Yang realm, but something unexpected happened. Without a sound, a stone statue that emitted a gentle radiance appeared in front of them. It listened quietly, and then it suddenly took action, pointing towards the back of the great vermilion ship. Roar! A mournful and miserable cry rang out. It was like a wounded beast, but also like the howling of a malicious spirit. A hazy gray mist appeared and was crushed by the Empyrean's beam of light. In the end, it exploded and was completely transformed by some kind of indescribable energy. On the great vermilion ship, regardless of whether it was the old weasel or the others, their scalps went numb. They were incomparably terrified. It was too terrifying. An inauspicious substance was actually following behind them. Everyone trembled with fear. If it wasn't for the Empyrean's Tao body overseeing this place, they wouldn't even know that they had been targeted. In the end, they would definitely die miserably. In the next moment, the stone statue disappeared without a sound. It crossed the sea of primal chaos and actually rushed in the direction of the Een realm universe. What? The Empyrean personally went over? On the great vermilion ship, the group of people trembled. Something big was going to happen. Didn't they say that the Empyrean couldn't personally come to the Een realm universe? They would be swallowed. This kind of terrifying matter wasn't an isolated case. There were some records of it in extremely ancient times. Although the ordinary people of the Yang realm didn't know, the Empyrean himself definitely understood. Because they came to work for the Empyrean, they were also told some secret. Now that the great Martial Empyrean had gone over, there was a problem that would cause the heavens to fall and the earth to split. They realized that the great Martial Empyrean cared too much about that item. He desired it incomparably and wanted to obtain it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have personally rushed over from the Yang realm. And now, he was even going to kill his way into the Een realm. No matter. The Empyrean is unrivaled. Even if there's something strange in the Een realm, it can't stop him. They guessed that the great Martial Empyrean would definitely suppress his own energy and wouldn't release waves above the god level. After all, they had done experiments. The Empyrean's decree could be brought over. As long as it didn't display its might, it would be fine. Even if it was suppressed to the Illuminator level, who would be a match for the Empyrean? He was unrivaled in the world. That's right. The Empyrean is unrivaled in the Een realm. In the past, accidents happened to people because they didn't understand. This time, we have done experiments and monitored the radiation value of the abyss. I'm sure the Empyrean knows how to avoid dangerous situations. They believed that no one could stop the Empyrean and that he wouldn't fall into a desperate situation. This time, he would definitely be able to bring back the ultimate treasure to the Yang realm. In the primal chaos, a long time after the Empyrean left, a cloud of gray fog appeared and quietly traveled far away, rushing toward the exit that connected to the Yang realm. Chapter 942. The Great Martial Heavenly Lord had arrived and officially entered the nether world. In reality, everyone had sensed him the moment he appeared. The scene was too extraordinary. At the edge of the primal chaos, the sky was filled with golden lotuses that were formed from energy. They were brilliant and sparkling as they bloomed continuously. When he walked out of the primal chaos and stepped on the sea of stars, the heavens rumbled and the star fields trembled. The laws of heaven and earth submitted to him. He stepped on a divine rainbow that was so dazzling that people couldn't open their eyes. He crossed the sea of stars and rushed directly to the abyss. The evolvers from all sides were shocked and their souls trembled. What level was this creature at? Some famous figures made a judgment. This was a creature at the Illuminator level. The energy level he displayed hadn't broken through the boundaries of the nether world. But why did he give people an incomparable sense of oppression? The Great Martial Heavenly Lord had arrived. He didn't use energy that surpassed the divine level. Instead, he had solved his own problems in the primal chaos. The strongest he could be was at the Illuminator level. For some reason, he desired the ultimate treasure of the nether world more than anyone else. That was because he knew some of the truth and was fortunate enough to see some records when he was young. That was why his obsession hadn't dissipated even after he became a celestial venerable. Instead, it became more and more intense. That was why he had come in person. The divine rainbow was dazzling and a rain of light scattered. The entire universe was filled with surging yang energy. The scene he brought was universally shocking and incomparably shocking. It was as if hundreds of burning suns had gathered together and formed a halo around him. He walked on the divine rainbow path and approached the abyss. He paused for a moment, but then he started walking again and truly reached the abyss. He stood here alone and illuminated the darkness. Even the heavenly eye could capture the scene here clearly. At this moment, there were falling petals all around him. They weren't the beautiful and delicate ordinary petals, but energy models that were all carriers of the Tao. These were natural laws as well as order. They constructed a beautiful scene, forming a magnificent scene. His radiance was restrained and no longer so glaring. People saw that he was actually a stone statue with a dignified expression. His face was as if it had been carved by a knife, and even his hair was angular. This was a stone embryo dug out from the primal chaos. It was a primordial object like the primordial gourd. Taiwu had found it and turned it into his Tao body. The stone core released a gentle radiance. Divine rainbows were beneath his feet, and in midair were all types of energy bodies that formed flower petals and other things. Behind him, golden divine lotuses took root in large amounts. They swayed with hua-hua sounds, the light of order rippling about. In addition, the Bodhi tree was growing beside him, and the ancient tree of life was spreading its branches on the other side. These were all different forms of energy, all of them evolved from order, constructed around him, becoming a part of the irregular scene he released. At this moment, all the powerful races in the universe felt as if their heads were about to explode. They were frightened. For example, the Tao race, the Buddhist race, the quasi-immortal race, and so on. Their inheritances were long enough and were the top 3 strongest races in this universe. Their ancestors came from the Yang realm. It was recorded in the personal letters of their ancestors that this was the embodiment of perfection within the realm. They were invincible within the same realm, and no one could oppose them. According to the handwritten records of some ancient clans, the demon ancestor back in those days as well as the dragon clan's distant ancestor, the #1 expert of the Een realm cosmos in prehistoric times, had both reached this state. When this type of creature walked through the world, irregular scenes covered the heavens. All types of energy bodies appeared brilliantly and brilliantly. When they gathered in the surroundings, no one under the heavens could match them. It was rumored that those two were possibly the only living beings that broke through the limits of the Een realm cosmos and surpassed the Illuminator realm. Now that such a creature had arrived, who could oppose him? Even if his energy was at the Illuminator realm, there were so many types of energy bodies. Every type could display a terrifying power, and if they were to really attack after combining, they could display an attack power that surpassed the upper limit of this universe. This meant that even though it was just Illuminator energy, the various irregular scenes he displayed in his flawless state could be comparable to the God realm after overlapping with each other. This was equivalent to sending a real god. In reality, if the people of the Een realm cosmos knew that this was a celestial venerable's Taoist body suppressing them and entering this place, they would be even more afraid. It was likely that the entire universe would go silent and not want to resist because there would be no suspense. Even if it was just a Taoist body of a celestial venerable level creature, it could also display the most flawless Illuminator state. What did it mean to be invincible within the same realm? This meant that it wasn't limited to this universe. It was the same in the Yang realm cosmos. Oh no, something big is going to happen at the Big Abyss. The big black yak and the others felt scared and anxious. Whether it was the serious yellow cattle or the usually laughing and joking Ouyang Feng, they all had grave expressions now. No one could relax and they were all extremely nervous. Even though they were so far away, they still felt their hearts palpitate as if something bad was about to happen. Chu Feng had just seen Yao Yao sink into the Big Abyss with his eyes when he suddenly turned his head. He felt a wave of horror when he felt the terrifying state of the stone embryo that had suddenly appeared. For no reason, his eyes actually started to bleed, and his heart was in great grief. An indescribable sadness emerged, making his heart feel as if it was being torn apart. What kind of ominous feeling was this? From seeing the appearance of the stone embryo to the indescribable throbbing of his heart, everything happened in an instant. And Chu Feng didn't hesitate at all. He suddenly swooped down toward the Big Abyss. He knew that he couldn't deal with this life form. Even if Yao Yao came up, there might be an accident. Chi. The stone embryo stood outside the Big Abyss. When it raised its hand, its stone palm was like the vault of heaven. It only pressed lightly toward the Big Abyss, and Chu Feng felt a strange fluctuation. At this moment, time seemed to flow backward, and there seemed to be fragments of time flickering in the surroundings. Chu Feng discovered that his surroundings were brilliant and no longer dark. This Big Abyss that was known to be unable to use its rules was actually subverted. There was a faint light of order spreading out, and he was imprisoned as if he had sunk into a terrifying swamp. In reality, he was still descending, but the speed was leveling off and gradually coming to a stop. Even a heavenly venerable's Taoist body wouldn't dare to explore the depths of the Big Abyss. It was already considered heaven-defying for the great martial deity to be able to reach this step with his Illuminator-level methods. The stone embryo's palm pressed lightly across the endless void, and Chu Feng's body was instantly covered in cracks. Then, it disintegrated and exploded into a bloody mist. Were it not for the Big Abyss trembling slightly at this crucial moment, causing the stone embryo's body to stop exerting force, Chu Feng's soul light would have been crushed. This was the Big Abyss, and it was very special. If it were another place, not to mention the bloody mist, Even the space around Chu Feng would have been annihilated, and everything would no longer exist. A wisp of gray mist drifted out from Chu Feng's blood. It was a very thin wisp with a blurry face, and it frantically blocked the remaining destructive power of that palm. Chu Feng's soul light could see it clearly. He was startled, furious, and terrified. That stone embryo had merely raised its hand and pressed down lightly, but his body and soul in the big abyss were almost extinguished. It was too terrifying. At the same time, he was also puzzled. Was that wisp of thin gray mist an ominous substance? He didn't even know when he had been struck. Or could it be that this was the gray mist he had been contaminated with in the foreign land for 100 years? But why did this wisp of thin gray mist help him swallow that stone embryo's destructive offensive energy? 1. The stone embryo's palm pressed down again. It didn't say a single word and just wanted to kill Chu Feng. His eyes were cold and emotionless. He didn't treat Chu Feng as an opponent at all, and it was as if he was harvesting weeds on the roadside. This kind of temperament, this kind of emotionless expression, was rather like the heaven and earth's heartless style of treating all living things as straw dogs. It looked down on all living things without any emotion. Chu Feng was originally doing his utmost to reassemble his body and condense the bloody mist, but now he exploded once again. Moreover, his soul light was also being crushed. In a split second, his spiritual will cracked, and then his mind went blank. He couldn't sense anything anymore. Finally, the stone embryo discovered what the ultimate treasure left behind after Chu Feng exploded was. He was moved for the first time, and there was an expression on his face. He used a mysterious technique and was about to detain the stone box. However, his body was slightly stiff. There was an indescribable rumbling sound in the big abyss that made his soul throb. There was a secret force pulling on that stone box. He couldn't retrieve it at the first possible moment. At the same time, he took a step back. His whole body was surrounded by countless runes, and all kinds of energy bodies were revolving around him. He stepped on the golden lotus of the great Tao. He was divine and untainted, as if he was standing at the end of eternity. Chu Feng is dead. What the F***ck? The big black yak, the yellow cattle, the Manchurian tiger, Zhou Quan, and the others were so furious that their eyes were about to split open. They clearly saw a part of the scene in the big abyss. That was because the great martial deity's entire body was shining. His energy body illuminated this place brilliantly, and it was completely different from before. The heaven's eye could accurately capture the scene there. Many people saw the terrifying bloody mist explode with their own eyes. Chu Feng was dead? He was suppressed and exploded by the stone embryo's palm. The whole world witnessed this. While all the races were shocked, they also felt an endless chill. Even many of the famous guests, who had survived from ancient times, had never encountered such a terrifying creature like the stone embryo in their long lives. There was a great fear in their hearts. Many people cried out. Those who had a close relationship with Chu Feng felt as if their hearts were being twisted by a knife. They felt a sharp pain in their hearts. In the sea of stars, after the deathly silence, there was a commotion and clamor. Countless noises rang out. This was too terrifying. The so-called unkillable great demon Chu Feng had been crushed with a flip of a hand. Even the incarnations of Jiangzhou, Su Hong, and the other deities couldn't do anything to him. But now, Chu Feng had been easily obliterated. Especially since this stone embryo didn't say a word from beginning to end. He silently walked over and directly attacked. This was even more terrifying. Up until now, no one knew who he was. He attacked coldly and intimidated the entire Yin Realm universe. Great martial deity. At the edge of the universe, two Tao children appeared in the primal chaos. They were both chanting their true names. They were chanting the words Great Martial Deity, just like the Tao race chanting the immeasurable deity. At this moment the universe was shaken. A deity had come? Who could believe it? Who dared to believe it? But they had no choice but to believe this kind of method. Apart from a deity descending, who else could have such a terrifying performance? A deity descends personally, eliminating all Yin spirits, said one of the two Tao children. He was very cold and arrogant. These words shocked people so much that they turned pale. The eyes of the black yak and the others were bloodshot. That was the great martial deity. He had killed their brother, Chu Feng. This made it difficult for them to control their emotions, and they wanted to kill their way over. In the great abyss, white light appeared. Ancient Yao Yao's physical body rushed up from the bottom. She was too fast. Her beautiful hair was disheveled, and her beautiful face was full of killing intent. After so many years, this was the first time this body showed such a vivid expression. She held the 3-foot-long divine sword in her hand and shot toward the great martial deity. Chapter 943. Yao Yao made her move. She had originally sunk into the boundless depths of the abyss, but now she transformed into a beam of white light and rushed out. She held a 3-foot-long green sword in her hand and dared to brandish it at the deity venerable. Meanwhile, in the great abyss, the stone case was sinking. Its back was covered in bloodstains, scarlet and ghastly. Empyrean Extreme Marshal was neither happy nor worried. He was silent and indifferent. After crushing Chu Feng with a flip of his hand, he didn't have the slightest change in his mood. In his eyes, there was no difference between all living beings in this world, whether they were ants or planet. Perhaps in his eyes, Chu Feng was just a rock or a blade of grass. But now, when faced with Yao Yao's breathtaking sword, he was still completely unmoved. He looked at it indifferently and raised his hand to strike forward. He was a stone core, an innate object that was dug out from the primal chaos by the great martial deity, refined into a Tao body that was extremely sturdy. With a chong sound, it collided with the sword made from mother gold, but it wasn't damaged at all, sparks flying in all directions. Yao Yao's white clothes fluttered in the wind. She didn't stop at all. After the divine sword pierced his palm, she borrowed the force and spun up. She streaked across the sky and appeared above the stone embryo's head in a split second. Then, she dived down with extreme speed, and the tip of the sword pierced toward the top of the great martial Skylord's head. Boom! 3 lotuses suddenly appeared above the stone fetus's head. They were snow-white and flawless. They released 3 strands of qi, which turned into 3 beams of sword qi that rushed into the sky. This was the Sword of Order. He casually displayed it and poured it out without restraint. The light of slaughter penetrated the sky dome, snow-white and dazzling. The innate sword light formed from the qi of the great Tao was incomparable. One sword light struck the divine sword in Yao Yao's hand, while the other 2 sword lights pierced toward Yao Yao's physical body. Even someone as strong as Yao Yao didn't avoid all of them. This was a sword of the great Tao, and it was formed by a deity nurturing his qi. Even if it was suppressed to the Illuminator realm, it was still universally shocking. Puff! One of the streaks of sword qi pierced through Yao Yao's shoulder and blood splattered everywhere. That snow-white long skirt was originally the #1 defensive battle garment in the past, but now it was also slashed open. The exceptional Tao sword was incomparably sharp. Princess! In various parts of the universe, some people's hearts trembled as they cried out in alarm. Princess Yao Yao, don't lose! A haze appeared in everyone's hearts. The previously breathtaking Yao Yao was now injured as soon as they exchanged blows. It made people worried. Xiao! Yao Yao's white clothes were stained with blood. She soared high into the sky and stood several kilometers away. Stone Core was indifferent, walking forward. There were energy bodies all around him, all types of irregular scenes appearing, carrying powerful auras, making the void rumble, tremble. With a single step, he arrived. He pointed out with his finger, and a beam of violet light shot out. As soon as it appeared off in the distance, A rumbling sound could be heard as it transformed into violet mist that blotted out the starry sky. The evolvers of the world were all horrified. Just a casual point of his finger was enough to produce the auspicious and majestic purple chi from the east. It made people emotionally moved, and their expressions couldn't help but freeze. Chi chi chi. Yao Yao was brandishing her sword. Her movements didn't seem fast, but it was dazzling. Even their soul light resonated and trembled. Thousands upon thousands of sword embryos soared in front and behind her. Every single one of them pierced through the firmament. They were extremely huge and resembled pillars that supported the sky. They were extremely terrifying as they flickered with a chilly metallic luster. Clang clang clang. As the 3-foot-long blade in her hand slashed forward, the tens of thousands of giant swords in front of her moved together and slashed forward. The void was slashed open and collapsed. Boom! The vast and mighty violet mist couldn't cover the void and was slashed open. Order runes erupted intensely, and law patterns blossomed unceasingly. It was extremely dazzling. In a split second, sword chi was like a divine rainbow. It crisscrossed and surged, illuminating the entire abyss. It was like a great Tao flower blossoming unceasingly in this area. Yao Yao had slashed out no less than 100,000 times. This involved the light of order and law patterns that illuminated the heavens. Every beam of sword light was boundlessly terrifying. They pierced through the starry sky with boundless destructive power. For a moment, sparks flew in all directions in front of the stone embryo. His palms slapped continuously, and all kinds of beams of light collapsed intensely. They burned there, and the runes exploded. This was truly shocking. There was actually someone who could fight with a celestial venerable to this extent. Even though the great Valiant had suppressed his realm and was only at the Illuminator level, he had experienced a long period of time and was able to become the founder of a sect. Naturally, he was boundlessly terrifying and had shaken the past and present. However, he was now being held back and was fighting intensely with someone else. Chi. In the end, Yao Yao used an extremely stunning sword strike. Sword chi slashed open the void, and the vast white energy waves formed a large bell that suppressed the great valiant celestial venerable below. He wielded his sword like a god, and the runes evolved into sword light. It transformed into a great Tao bell that suppressed the stone embryo. The stone embryo was cold and emotionless. He blasted out a fist, and with a clang, he pierced through the large bell condensed from sword Tao runes. However, the moment the large bell disintegrated, boundless sword intent blossomed and continuously strangled him. Clanging sounds rang out, and the clanging of the sword shook the heavens. If it were any other opponent, even a peak illuminator would be drowned by the boundless sword intent formed after the large bell exploded, and their blood would splatter across the starry sky. This was a trump card. The stone embryo was still unharmed. Countless sword lights shot out violently as the large bell disintegrated. They formed into clusters and slashed at his body, but unfortunately, they only left some faint marks on his body. They couldn't cut through his stone body at all. Innate objects weren't just for show. They were sturdy and immortal. This was an innate aptitude that couldn't move him. His eyes were cold and indifferent, and just looking at them made people afraid. Chi. No one saw how Yao Yao moved the moment all the sword lights blossomed. She was graceful as she mixed in the sword lights. She actually appeared beside the stone embryo, and her body and sword became one. She fiercely brandished her sword and slashed at the stone embryo's neck. Clang! Sparks flew in all directions and an ear-piercing sound rang out. The great martial heavenly lord was struck by the sword. However, everyone's heart sank because his head didn't fly out. It was too sturdy. Huh! Soon after, everyone was stunned. Blood flowed from the stone embryo's neck. A deep wound had appeared, and it was almost completely cut open. He was actually injured. Everyone's hearts trembled. What kind of sword was this? It was absolutely peerless, and it almost beheaded the Heavenly Lord. One could imagine that if it were any other illuminator, they wouldn't be able to withstand it at all and would certainly be beheaded. Even though this sword was too fast and the divine light had already flashed by, there was still a bleak sword intent pervading the air. It was spreading, and the space nearby was being cut apart. At the edge of the universe, in the primal chaos, the two Tao children were dumbfounded. Was this real? What did they see? The great martial Heavenly Lord was almost beheaded by a woman? Boom! At this moment, the great martial Heavenly Lord was different. His blood and chi exploded, and even the stone embryo was overflowing with scarlet light. It was as though a primordial beast had been resurrected. His eyes were cold and emotionless as he stared at Yao Yao. At the same time, symbols flickered in his pupils, and all kinds of energy bodies appeared in the surroundings. Beside him, an ancient tree of life swayed gently. Its branches were suffused with vigorous energy, and a Bodhi tree was glowing. Strands of great Tao divine chains hung down from it. In front of him, golden lotuses covered the ground and took root in the void. Chi, chi, chi. He made his move, and it was much more terrifying than before. The sky was filled with golden petals. Those were lotuses blooming and flying out. They were sparkling and dazzling as they revolved. In this instant, the heavens rumbled and the great Tao trembled. Everything was suppressed by the great martial Heavenly Lord. The golden petals danced in the air in an extremely beautiful and dazzling manner. But this was terrifying and intimidating. These petals cut apart the space of the universe and were incomparably powerful. Outsiders simply couldn't block them. One could see that the giant star remains outside the abyss were directly shattered upon contact with the golden lotus petals and turned into fine powder. Its destructive power was inestimable. One had to know that these broken stars were no different from real stars, but when the petals danced in the air, they were destroyed en masse. Yao Yao was moving at an incomparably fast speed. She traversed the dark space and did her best to evade. However, these energy bodies were extremely terrifying. They pierced through space and followed along the way, becoming more and more dazzling. In the world, regardless of whether it was the Yang realm or the Yin realm, the lotus was an extremely powerful and profound energy body. Now, after the great martial Heavenly Lord activated it, the golden lotus petals cut through everything in their way. Later on, the divine sword in Yao Yao's hand was brandished unceasingly. The sword light was like rain as it cut through the heaven and earth. It was as though a peerless sword immortal was about to ascend. It was dazzling, beautiful, and otherworldly. However, even though the golden lotus energy body wasn't a secret technique exclusive to the Heavenly Lord and existed everywhere, it was still terrifying. Its destructive power was astonishing, and it was very difficult to deal with. Yao Yao was drenched in blood. Even the number 1 ancient battle clothes in the Yin realm couldn't defend against it. A few mournful red flowers bloomed. Her shoulders, ribs, and arms were cut or pierced by the golden lotus petals in 7 or 8 places. Everyone's hearts tightened. The great martial Heavenly Lord was unfathomable and too terrifying. Even though they were both at the Illuminator level, his evolutionary path was flawless and would make people despair. Whoosh! All of a sudden, Yao Yao circulated her breathing technique and her aura changed. Her empty eyes suddenly had spirit and vigor. The real Yao Yao of the present world temporarily united with the powerful soul light produced from her corporeal body and grasped this body. She had already advanced to the Illuminator realm in the 100 years she had been in the foreign realm. She had deduced all kinds of techniques and paths suitable for herself. In a split second, immortal light illuminated the 9 heavens around her. She was otherworldly, and all kinds of energy bodies appeared as her sleeves fluttered. A pool of primal chaos appeared beside her with green lotuses swaying and rustling within. This was naturally a supreme energy body. Rosy clouds rose under her feet. That was the light of ascension, an otherworldly and almost illusory energy body. Fragments of time rose and fell in front of her like ocean waves. Moreover, there was a sparkling rain of petals fluttering about. She glanced at the abyss and saw the stone box falling forever. Her pupils constricted, and her murderous aura immediately overflowed. She displayed her own path and techniques and attacked the great martial heavenly lord. She really was like an ascended immortal as she moved with the rosy clouds. A rain of light enveloped the outside of the abyss. Yao Yao's white clothes were like an immortal as her sword light pierced through eternity. Above the extreme, an unequaled path was born. The most terrifying thing was that Yao Yao was circulating her special breathing technique. She seemed to have comprehended the ultimate secret of the robbery induction breathing technique, and the light in her eyes became increasingly intense. Boom! The might of one sword cut through the universe and slashed apart the undying. She arrived in front of the great martial heavenly lord, and all kinds of energy bodies collided continuously between them. It was too intense. People from all sides were shocked. They were flabbergasted like clay statues and wooden sculptures. At the edge of the universe, the people from the Yang realm who had followed along felt their heads hurt. What kind of person was this? She seemed to be full of vitality, and could actually fight so fiercely with a heavenly lord. She had cultivated the Illuminator realm to such perfection. It was unbelievable. The heavenly lord was unequaled. After suppressing his realm, he was perfect in every aspect, but a young woman could contend with him. If this news were to spread back to the Yang realm, it would certainly shock the world. Robbery induction. The great martial heavenly lord spoke for the first time. He only said 2 words, and his eyes were incomparably resplendent. He stared coldly at Yao Yao and already knew what kind of breathing technique this woman was using. Boom! At this moment, the sword light that Yao Yao slashed out was boundlessly grand and suppressed the world. It was as though the great Tao of the great world was pressing down and displaying the ultimate power of illumination. She was fighting a life and death battle with a heavenly lord. Her white clothes were stained with blood, but she wasn't at a disadvantage. Especially when she looked back at the great abyss and saw the stone box falling into the darkness, her murderous intent soared to the sky. Originally, she was as ethereal as a fairy, but now she was like a war immortal with boundless murderous intent when she made such a swift and fierce move. Yao Yao brandished her sword and pierced more than 10 bloody holes on the stone embryo's body. After seeing through the final secret of the robbery induction breathing technique, her combat power surged and her destructive power was extremely terrifying. She could even cut the stone embryo. Chi. A sword light flew out and opened a terrifying wound on the great martial heavenly lord's abdomen. It almost cut him in half. Buzz. The void trembled as Yao Yao used her special breathing technique to draw in the energy of all things in the universe. She also stimulated the potential contained in her corporeal body. The stone embryo's arm was cut off with a slash of her sword. It flew out with a rain of blood. Chapter 944. The sword sliced through the Empyrean's arm. The stone core's blood gushed out. His right arm flew out and fell into the great abyss. The world was shaken, and there was no one who wasn't shocked. Who was this? Empyrean Extreme Martial. The founder of a sect had lived for countless years. Even if it wasn't his true body, it was just a Tao body that had been suppressed to the Illuminator level. However, it was still related to the Celestial Venerables. How could his arm be chopped off just like that? In the underworld, the people of all races were shocked. Their bodies were hot and sweating. Were they going to witness a miracle today? Celestial Master. At the edge of the cosmos, those from the Yang realm were trembling. They were completely terrified. If something happened to the supreme martial heavenly deity here, and he was killed by a white-clothed woman, then the effects would be far-reaching. Even the Yang realm would be shaken. This was something that was originally impossible to happen. Although he was at the reflector level now, every evolution level of Taiwu was perfect and flawless. He was so strong that he could not be stronger. Qi. Outside the great abyss, Yao Yao's style was unmatched. She held a 3-foot-long divine sword in her hand and activated the robbery induction breathing technique. Every strike was like a phoenix striking the heavens as she used her strongest energy. The sword Qi was like a rainbow, and the sword light was like rain as it poured down in torrents. Puff! Even though it was a body made of stone, it was still like flesh, a bloody hole pierced through it. Sparkling and glowing blood splashed out, absorbed by the great abyss' mysterious power. Yao Yao's hair danced in the wind. Her figure was tall and slender, and as she moved, she was like a fairy from the 9 heavens. Her posture was graceful, but her murderous movements were incomparably decisive. She wanted to kill a deity sovereign. 2 more terrifying injuries appeared on the stone core. Blood was everywhere. The injuries it suffered from were extremely serious. Nice kill. In the depths of the universe, the big black yak and the others roared. They were agitated, but at the same time, there was some grief and indignation. In any case, Chu Feng had died, and this made them feel terrible. Now that they saw Yao Yao's exceptional style and how she had seriously injured the great martial deity, they resonated with her. Following that, their blood surged, and they wished they could rush to the scene and participate. Number 1 Under the ancient starry skies. The legendary figures of the various races all thought of the girl in snow-white clothes from the ancient times who single-handedly defeated the allied forces of the various races. Although she was killed by the giants in the end, she had left behind too much glory back then. No one in the same realm could match her. Many people still remembered that the energy bodies she created back then were researched by various clans for many years, their effects profound. Boom! The stone embryo erupted. His golden eyes grew colder and colder. He grabbed the energy form of the ancient tree of life and used it as a wooden staff. Outside the great abyss, there were many star remnants that were similar to normal stars. However, under the attack of the tree of life, an energy entity, they were instantly reduced to dust. The celestial venerable was furious. The starry sky trembled and the Een realm universe rumbled as if it was about to disintegrate. Dong! 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 Both sides fought intensely, energy bodies erupting. The sparkling flower petals around them, immortal light and auspicious energy collided, producing symbols and natural laws. During this process, the stone core remained calm, its expression indifferent. Even though it lost an arm condensed from an innate object, it didn't show any joy or worry, as if it was a carrier of the great Tao that overlooked the world of mortals. Big Black Yak, Yellow Cattle, Ouyang Feng, and the others really couldn't stand the sight of him. It was mainly because he had killed Chu Feng in such an indifferent manner. Now that he was finally being suppressed by Yao Yao, he was still acting in this manner. This made them wish that Yao Yao could kill him immediately. The battle outside the great abyss became more and more intense, and everyone was dumbfounded. Toward the end, a Bodhi tree rumbled beside the great martial celestial venerable. It emitted boundless light and floated there with a rustling sound. Order runes trembled, and beams of light fell down like silk ribbons to protect the stone core. Boom! At the same time, the primal chaos pool in front of Yao Yao shone. The green lotus within swayed and shone brilliantly. It flew out with the primal chaos pool and collided with the Bodhi tree. This was the collision of energy bodies. This was a decisive battle between the two at the Illuminator realm, and the battle had reached its climax. Buzz! Suddenly, the great martial celestial venerable formed a magical seal. It was mysterious and unfathomable as he absorbed all the energy drifting in the universe. It was as if he was swallowing the heavens. The sea of stars dimmed as endless essence condensed here. He was swallowing in large mouthfuls, and at the same time, He was urging his breathing technique. The atmosphere was grand and intimidating, and the entire sea of stars was trembling. He launched a fatal attack. He was a celestial venerable himself, but he was injured like this. It seemed to make him impatient, and emotional fluctuations appeared in his eyes. Boom! Yao Yao was struck and sent flying. There were specks of blood on her white battle clothes, and her mouth and nose were overflowing with blood. She had been injured. In a split second, the stone core approached again. Its single arm suppressed the firmament and covered everything. It emitted a terrifying radiance, and its entire body was sparkling and translucent. The blood qi it emitted was mixed with many great Tao runes. This was the forbidden chapter of the breathing technique he cultivated, and it suppressed the Yin realm. Yao Yao was also urging the robbery induction breathing technique. Her white clothes fluttered, and the sword core in her hand was so sacred that it erupted with a rain of light. Her body was like ice and jade, and it was so pure and holy that it made people feel ashamed of their inferiority. Dazzling energy surged out mightily. In the end, blood splattered everywhere as it was continuously absorbed by the secret force in the abyss. Bang! Yao Yao fell down, and half of her body was dyed in blood. There was even a finger mark between her eyebrows. Her head had almost been pierced by the great martial celestial venerable's finger. It was too thrilling, and the place where her soul light was condensed was almost destroyed. On the other side, the great martial celestial venerable was cut in half at the waist. The lower half of his body separated and fell into the abyss. Kill! Yao Yao lightly shouted. She rose high into the air and attacked again. This time, she threw away the sword core and formed a fist seal. She looked as elegant as an immortal, but when she truly brandished her fists, she simply wanted to break the world and seek eternity. Bang! 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 Punch after punch, she blasted the stone core back. Its body was originally full of sword scars, but now it was cracking. The great martial celestial venerable disintegrated, and his face revealed anger. He was no longer indifferent as he was blasted away in a split second. His innate stone body was split into pieces, and it fell into the abyss accompanied by a rain of blood. Yao Yao staggered back, and she couldn't stand steadily. She was also seriously injured and on the verge of death. All kinds of energy forms were eroding her body. The world was silent. The evolvers of every race were dumbfounded. Their hearts were throbbing, and even their souls were trembling. They simply couldn't believe their eyes. The number one person of the ancient golden generation, Yao Yao, had actually beheaded the celestial venerable. At the edge of the universe, the people from the Yang realm were even more shocked. Then, a group of people knelt down and their bodies shivered. The two Tao children were wailing. A celestial venerable's Tao body had been beheaded. This was going to be a big matter. Celestial venerable, how could you be defeated? Who can contend with you at the same realm? I don't believe it. This must be fake. It can't be real. The people from the Yang realm couldn't accept it. They were shouting at the edge of the universe, and their bodies were trembling. Well done, Brother Chufeng. Princess Yao Yao has taken revenge for you. The Black Yak and the others were also shouting with grief. Whoosh! Yao Yao soared into the sky and directly leaped into the abyss. She chased after the stone box and wanted to find it and bring it back. After a long time, Yao Yao appeared. Her face was pale and lacked the color of blood. She appeared in the darkness with the stone box in her hands, and gradually rose into the sky from the abyss. However, her figure suddenly turned sluggish. She immediately turned around and dove into the abyss. A stone core appeared at the edge of the abyss, and a halo flowed all over his body. He raised his hand and pointed forward, imprisoning Yao Yao, who was charging into the abyss. The stone core appeared once again. The great martial celestial venerable's Tao body hadn't died at all. He watched as those stone arms and blood fell into the abyss. In fact, They had all reassembled below and were hiding here. Yao Yao's perception was too sharp. She immediately discovered that the situation wasn't right, so she turned around and rushed down, borrowing the protection of the abyss. Rumble! The great martial celestial venerable's stone body glowed. It was sparkling and resplendent as though it was formed of immortal ancestral Taoist material. He became increasingly unfathomable as he tried his best to imprison Yao Yao and bring her and the stone box up. This sinister person, the Black Yak, the Manchurian Tiger, and Zhou Quan were startled, frightened, and angry. They realized that the great martial celestial venerable had been killed not long ago, and he had been beheaded on purpose. It was all for the sake of numbing everyone and bringing the stone box up through Yao Yao's hands. Although the great martial celestial venerable was unfathomable, he didn't dare enter the abyss. That was why he was defeated on his own, giving people the false impression that he had been killed and swallowed by the abyss. A dignified celestial was actually willing to bear the stain of being killed to obtain the stone box. It was clear how much he valued this item. Yao Yao knew that the great martial celestial venerable had held back, or else he wouldn't have been killed so easily. She didn't want any accidents to happen and didn't want the stone box to fall into the great martial celestial venerable's hands. She dove down with all her might, but it was as though she had sunk into a swamp. For a moment, the great martial celestial venerable and Yao Yao were in a deadlock. They were too far apart, and the great martial celestial venerable couldn't pull the beautiful Yao Yao up completely. Go! Yao Yao shouted lightly. She gathered all the energy in her body and slashed with her sword. She cut open the shackles and threw the stone box into the abyss. Then, she turned to look at the stone embryo and pointed her sword at it. What a pity! I was only one step away. The great martial celestial venerable finally spoke with regret on his face. Then, he looked at Yao Yao calmly and said, I want to accept you as my disciple and let you inherit my mantle. In the future, I will go into seclusion, and my sect will respect you. This kind of promise and accepting a disciple not only shocked all the evolvers in the Yin realm universe, but it also made those from the Yang realm dumbfounded and incomparably shocked. How much did the great martial celestial venerable cherish talent? He wanted to accept the white-clothed girl as his disciple? The group from the Yang realm didn't dare believe it. They knew that a celestial venerable wouldn't open his mouth under normal circumstances. Once he made a decision and said it, it wouldn't be child's play. Very soon, they were silent again because Yao Yao's performance was indeed too stunning. To be able to fight with the great martial celestial venerable to that extent, even if he held back and was killed on purpose, was still a world-shocking performance. After calming down, the people from the Yang realm realized that this Yao Yao was indeed peerless. Even if she was a rogue cultivator, she would most likely become a celestial venerable in the future if she grew up, and if she received great martial's guidance, her future achievements would be unimaginable and shocking. What responded to great martial was a beam of sword light. Yao Yao made her move and slashed at him. The world-shocking sword light streaked across the dark abyss. The stone embryo disappeared without a sound and appeared outside the abyss. He looked at her indifferently and said, You're not my opponent. A celestial venerable's methods are boundless. Even if you're a perfect illuminator, you still haven't comprehended the realm above the God realm. But he didn't make his move because no matter what, Yao Yao was too stunning. It was impossible to take her down directly. Bang! Great Marshal stood outside the abyss and stretched out his hand. He pierced through the void and opened up a wormhole. In the depths of the endless universe, the void split open. Then, everyone on a vital planet trembled. With a boom, this place turned into a land of death. An entire planet was annihilated. The vigorous life energy condensed was grabbed by a large hand in the sky and rapidly absorbed. The next moment, this large hand appeared in another part of the starry sky. Another planet disintegrated, and the endless, vigorous life energy was devoured. This scene shocked the realm universe. At this moment, the great martial celestial venerable destroyed 6 vital planets in succession. There were tens of billions of high-level life forms on each planet, such as the human race and the golden giant race. This was simply unimaginable. 200 billion people died an unnatural death in the blink of an eye. And here in the abyss, the stone embryo became more and more lustrous. Some of the blood energy he had lost earlier was replenished. He still hadn't absorbed enough and was still making his move. But Yao Yao moved. She wouldn't allow him to act wantonly like this. She rushed up to the abyss and fought him again. In reality, the great martial celestial venerable was neither happy nor worried when he destroyed the planet. He didn't have the slightest emotional fluctuation. In his eyes, whether it was Chu Feng or the tens of billions of life forms on a vital planet, there was no difference. They were all mortals. His current state was similar to the supreme indifference recorded in the ancient book. He looked down on the common people and was indifferent to everything. He was like a humanoid carrier of the great Tao that walked the world. This kind of detachment and indifference made Yao Yao, Yellow Cattle, and the others unable to accept it. What celestial venerable? Does he really think he jumped out of the universe and looked down on everything in the iron cage? CK your grandpa. In the universe, many people rebuked angrily. The Black Yak and the others couldn't restrain their anger. They couldn't stand the great martial celestial venerable's calm demeanor after killing someone. Bring me the stone box. The great martial celestial venerable spoke. He no longer grabbed and destroyed the planet. Instead, he stood there with one hand holding the mother gold sword in Yao Yao's hand. He was calm and unhurried. After an unknown amount of time, there was a fluctuation in the stone box in the depths of the abyss. It was trembling lightly and many luminous fragments were condensing. That was Chu Feng's soul light. He hadn't died. When he was shattered by the great martial celestial venerable, the bell in the stone box rang and guided his soul light into the opened crack of the stone box. He was saved. Qin Luoyin's corpse wasn't the only thing in the space of the stone box. There were also some important items, such as the 3 seeds and the diamond chakram. Chu Feng was guided in by the soul bell. He had recovered and was at a loss. His soul light gathered together again and recovered with his breathing technique. It gradually brightened and the blood on the stone box was also gathered inside. He couldn't recover his corporeal body in a short time. Now, his whole body was scarlet red from top to bottom. His blood and soul light had condensed together and he finally had consciousness. He appeared outside the stone box and held it in his hand. He was fixed in the darkness of the abyss. He was already awake. Even though he was a condensed body of blood and soul, the runes of the fiery eyes still appeared and he could see the scene above the abyss. Yao Yao and the stone embryo were fighting fiercely and bloody light would appear from time to time. Yao Yao's situation wasn't good. Even though she had left bloody marks on the stone embryo, her own injuries were even more serious. Her body had once been pierced by a palm imprint and her blood dyed the starry skies. Yao Yao had returned. He really wanted to shout out, but he was too weak and couldn't transmit his voice. Next, his heart throbbed. He saw the great martial celestial venerable's hand covering the sky as he pierced through the void and opened a wormhole. He captured Yellow Cow, Zhou Quan, and the Manchurian tiger and brought them here. Roar! The big black yak and the others roared angrily. They were in the demonic ancestral cauldron as they drove the weapon and crashed into the great martial celestial venerable. The great martial celestial venerable looked on coldly and lightly flicked his finger. Even though the demonic ancestral cauldron dodged with all its might, it was still grazed by the beam of light. Some of the great demons in the cauldron were shattered into pieces and turned into a bloody mist from the violent impact. At the same time, The great martial celestial venerable sensed something and looked down at the abyss. His golden pupils shone as he stared at Chu Feng's soul light and the stone box in the bloody mist. "Chu Feng isn't dead," he said softly. This shocked Yao Yao. Soon after, she also sensed the situation in the abyss. The black yak, yellow cow, Zhou Quan, and the others were pleasantly surprised, but their hearts soon became heavy. Even though Chu Feng wasn't dead, the great martial celestial venerable was still alive. Who could kill him? I heard there was a mastiff who met death unafraid and unafraid. It's rather admirable. Now I also want to observe the Yin realm's various emotional fluctuations and understand the power of your soul fluctuations. At this moment, who dares to stand out and die for Yao Yao and Chu Feng? If anyone dares to do so, I will pardon Yao Yao and Chu Feng in the name of the Celestial Venerable. I guarantee that they won't die. The great martial Celestial Venerable actually opened his mouth to speak such a long sentence. It was completely different from his previous behavior. "Why do I need you to pardon my life?" Yao Yao shouted. Even though her battle clothes were stained with blood, she was still fighting. She didn't yield in the slightest. Her fighting spirit was high as she fought fiercely. However, whether it was Chu Feng, the black yak, or yellow cow, everyone could see that Yao Yao was at a disadvantage in the end. She might suffer the first defeat of her life and perish here. It wasn't that she wasn't strong enough, but the great martial celestial venerable had used a technique that surpassed the illuminator level. That was the comprehension of a god. Even though he didn't activate the energy that surpassed the limits of this universe, it was enough to kill Yao Yao. Even if the great martial celestial venerable used a technique at the illuminator level, Yao Yao might not be his match. She might not be able to kill him, let alone now that the great martial celestial venerable wasn't holding back at all. The difference in realms was too great, and the things they comprehended couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. That kind of heavenly moat couldn't be crossed. No matter how stunning Yao Yao was, it was impossible for her to kill a celestial venerable. There was such a difference in realms, and no one could do it in the past, present, or future. The black yak, Ouyang Feng, and yellow cow cried out in alarm. They couldn't bear it any longer as blood blossomed from Yao Yao's body. At the same time, Chu Feng was also charging upwards. He roared weakly and was incomparably worried. "I'm willing to die in place of my brother, Chu Feng, and Princess Yao Yao. I'll satisfy the cold-blooded celestial venerable's perverted hobby," roared the black yak as he charged out of the demon ancestor's cauldron. "I'm not afraid either." Yellow cow stood out. "Is your Lord Tiger afraid of death? I've never been." The Manchurian tiger and the others also walked out one after another. Your Lord Donkey will also be unyielding for once." Even the weakest old donkey stood out. The great martial celestial venerable didn't even look at them. He lightly tapped a few times with his fingers, and a few of the great demons in this group exploded. "My #Yen Great Martial." Chu Feng trembled. He didn't have a corporeal body, but he still felt the trembling sensation of his raging blood attacking his entire body. He couldn't suppress it and felt as though his body was about to explode. Chapter 945. When the stone embryo said these words, his voice was calm and without the slightest ripple. A few clouds of bloody mist drifted not far away. Those were a few great demons, and they had all been killed by his finger. At this moment, Tai Wu once again used a finger to block Yao Yao's 3-feet-long sword. Even the divine sword made of gold couldn't cut through his stone finger. He was calm and indifferent, aloof. He looked down on everyone, making them angry and powerless. Chu Feng in the abyss growled. Bloody mist surged all over his body, and he was filled with righteous indignation. He really wanted to kill Tai Wu. The old llama was dead, the golden rock king was eliminated, the old black bear was killed, and the mountain tortoise of Kongtong had also died after being pierced by a finger. There were specks of blood here, and a few weak wisps of soul light could dissipate at any time. Chi! Yao Yao's beautiful eyes flowed with divine splendor. She wasn't discouraged and was angry. Her confidence didn't waver as she once again urged the brilliant sword light to slash forward. The Black Yak, Yellow Cattle, Ouyang Feng, Zhou Quan, and the others were still alive, but they clenched their fists and trembled. This wasn't caused by fright, but by anger and sorrow. The 3-meter-tall Horse King's bald head was shining. This boorish man was crying. He had already lost his daughter when the Shilin clan and the deity race attacked Mount Eternal in the Eastern Sea to hunt them down. Now, he had lost his master, the old Lama. Is there an afterlife? Is there an afterlife? Old brothers, take care. The Manchurian tiger was full of emotion as he watched the Golden Rock King, the Mountain Tortoise, and the others die. In the bloody mist, their weak soul light was disintegrating. It looked like they couldn't hold on any longer and were about to be destroyed in body and soul. Yellow Cattle choked with sobs and said, "Ancestral demon cauldron, please protect them and preserve the last of their soul light. We'll be parting in this life, but I still want to see them in my next life." The great demons of Kunlun had always been together since Earth's recovery. They had already become each other's relatives and family, going through life and death together. Suddenly losing a few people like this made everyone's heart ache. Their noses were sore and their eyes were blurry. The Black Yak's eyes were red. He recalled the great battle between the eastern and western evolvers at the foot of Mount Kunlun. The old mountain tortoise and the golden-winged roc had displayed their might and chased away the enemy together. The ancestral demon cauldron released a rain of light. Right when it was about to move, the stone core took action again, a finger pointing over. With a dong sound, even though the ancestral demon cauldron erupted with dazzling symbols, it was still blasted flying. Cracks appeared on it, unable to stop the great martial finger. "If I make a move, who can stop me?" he said. Then, he lightly tapped with his finger again. With a bang, the Horse King, whose head was shining, turned into a cloud of blood mist and died on the spot. The Black Yak panted heavily. His bell-like eyes were bloodshot as he roared, "F***CK your grandpa supremely martial deity. Some of our brothers have already stepped forward and are willing to die in your place. Now that you've killed them, why don't you stop?" Yellow Cattle, the Manchurian tiger, the old Grandmaster Wu Qifeng, Zhou Quan, and the others were unable to restrain their anger. This was a sad and indignant scene. The people who had gone through life and death with them were killed one by one. It was too heartbreaking. I said I'd let Yao Yao and Chu Feng off, but I never said I'd forgive you all. From the most ancient times until today, how many people have dared to disrespect me and speak nonsense? Bang! He pointed with his finger, and the Black Yak immediately disintegrated. His humanoid body no longer existed. His coarse horns broke off inch by inch, and his tall body directly collapsed. He turned into blood and bones as he fell. Old Black! Brother Ox! Beside him, the Manchurian tiger, the old donkey, and Yellow Cattle called out loudly. All of them were in tears. The Black Yak was the most popular among the group of great demons. He could get along well with anyone. Ordinarily, he was rough and even like an old ruffian at times, but in fact, he was very warm-hearted and would help anyone who was in trouble. In the end, he died just like that. He only stood up for his brother and opened his mouth because he felt indignant. In the end, he was killed by Tai Wu's finger. Yao Yao attacked frantically, but she couldn't stop this tragedy. The Black Yak's bloody mist drifted in the air. Below the abyss, Chu Feng roared. His heart felt as if it was being twisted by a knife. It was extremely painful, and he found it hard to bear watching this bloody scene. At the same time, he knew that the other party only had one purpose in doing this. In fact, he wanted him to come up and offer up the stone box. Although he didn't say it directly, He definitely had that intention. What death substitute? What not to kill him and Yao Yao? These were all excuses. Tai Wu longed for the ancient, rough, and mysterious stone box in his hands. Outside the abyss, Tai Wu was very calm. There were no waves or waves. Tai Wu, stop right now! Chu Feng roared angrily because he saw Tai Wu raising his other hand while fighting Yao Yao. Bang! The demonic ancestral cauldron moved and swallowed the heaven and earth. It wanted to suck in Yellow Cattle, Ouyang Feng, and the Manchurian Tiger, but in the end it suffered a heavy blow. With a clang it was sent flying. The cracks on its body increased, and the cauldron wall was almost pierced through. Then Tai Wu raised his hand and killed the Wudong Grandmaster Wu Qifeng with a ripping sound. He turned him into a ball of blood, and the Grandmaster of a generation died. Senior, Yellow Cattle, Ouyang Feng, and the others were all shouting, F***CKU, Tai Wu, did you hear me? Stop right now. Chu Feng's eyes were about to split open. At the same time, he threw the stone box's lid into the depths of the abyss to threaten Tai Wu. His heart was dripping blood. It was incomparably unbearable to see the old Grandmaster, who had done him a great favor before he rose to power, die like this. I've never been afraid of threats. The stone body spoke calmly and pointed again. It was as if it was responding to Chu Feng. With a bang, the Manchurian Tiger died. Brother Tiger! Chu Feng felt like he was about to explode. They were all brothers who had gone through trials and tribulations together. They had gone through the most difficult times together, yet they had died just like that. The Manchurian Tiger, who once had no integrity and no standpoint, had become sworn friends with him in life and death. They had fought Schiller together on Mount Longhu, and the scenes of the past were still before his eyes. In the end, he had died just like that. Aren't you all afraid of death? The stone body spoke with a smile. He raised his hand again, ready to kill the next person at any time. Yao Yao attacked frantically and circulated the robbery induction breathing technique. Originally, she was already heavily injured, but now her energy had increased explosively. She fought with Tai Wu with everything she had and blocked his next move. What's there to be afraid of? Hee. Your grandpa donkey has always been afraid of death and was jokingly called a spineless coward by my brothers. But now Grandpa Donkey has stood out. Come. Grandpa is here, so what's there to be afraid of? I #yen%*. The old donkey let loose a torrent of curses. His emotions were stirred up. This time, he was very unyielding and didn't cower back at all. He cursed the Empyrean of Great Marshal to 18 generations of his ancestors. His relationship with the Black Yak and the Manchurian Tiger was the best. Seeing them die one after the other and mercilessly obliterated like that, his chest was stifled. He couldn't help but let out a long roar. He wanted to vent and roar in anger because he didn't fear death at all. Bang! The Empyrean of Great Marshal raised his hand and killed the old donkey. A bloody hole appeared between his brows, and then his body exploded inch by inch. Old donkey! Chu Feng, Yellow Cattle, Zhou Quan, and the others were all shouting. The stone body said calmly, Is there anyone who isn't afraid of death? I want to see how deep the friendship between you brothers is. I'm willing to spare whoever lowers their head. Ouyang Feng cursed and immediately jumped out. Your grandpa Ouyang Dao is here. What's there to be afraid of? Even if you kneel down and beg, I won't lower my head to look at you. You crippled stone. If there's a next life, I swear I'll kill you to avenge all my brothers. Yellow Cattle had long since become anxious. He swore with his voice that could still be considered tender. Behind him, the dragoness, Zhou Quan, and the remaining great demons also stood out. They didn't lower their heads or submit to the Empyrean of Great Marshal and glared at him furiously. Great Marshal, stop right now. I'll give you the stone box or else I'll throw you into the abyss, roared Chu Feng. He couldn't accept the result before his eyes. He couldn't bear it any more as his brothers died one after another. Earlier, even though he had already guessed that he and some of his brothers would die, he didn't want to lower his head. But now, seeing them turn into blood and bones like that, he couldn't hold on any longer and felt great grief in his heart. The Empyrean of Great Marshal stood there and collided with Yao Yao's sword edge. He used the ancient tree of life to suppress forward, and at the same time, he was also speaking. It's rare to not see the ugly side of human nature. I've always wondered why my Tao companion didn't encounter a benevolent Yin spirit back then. His expression was unperturbed, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. Everyone in the Yang realm knew that the Empyrean of Great Marshal hated Yin spirit. The whole world knew this because when he was young, his Tao companion was killed by a Yin spirit. Your gazes are filled with endless hatred. Are you incomparably hostile toward me? He shot a glance at everyone. As an Empyrean of a generation, you think yourself unrivaled. Do you feel any sense of accomplishment when you attack us like this? What kind of ancestor figure are you? The dragoness said with sorrow. It's only right and proper for me to kill you all, the Empyrean of Great Marshal replied calmly. This made everyone angry, and at the same time, they felt humiliated. The stone embryo looked down on them and then killed them. He even said that it was only right and proper. It was incomparably excessive. Perhaps in your eyes, I'm using my strength to bully the weak, evil, and cruel. But this doesn't matter to me. I'm just following my heart, and the Tao is natural. The Empyrean of Great Marshal's expression was calm. He was like an ancient well without ripples as he said, "Have you ever seen an azure dragon fighting above the 9 heavens look down on maggots on the ground? Different latitudes, different levels, it's hard to even feel pity. It's just like you all. Normally, you might unknowingly trample an entire field of ants to death while walking. Do you all feel guilty? No. That's why I've never left a trace in my heart when I kill you all. It's just like how you all step on the ants of the mortal world. I walk my own path and follow my own Tao and heart," he added. While speaking, he raised his hand with a bang and pierced through Ouyang Feng and Zhou Quan one after the other, ending their lives. Chi. Then, he pointed out with his finger again. The dragoness perished and disappeared from this world. You motherf ***, stop! Chu Feng roared. If his flesh and blood still existed, he would have long since shed hot tears. His group of old friends had all died. The days they spent together were always filled with joy and laughter. If they weren't there in the future, even if he could survive today, what meaning would there be? Chu Feng wouldn't be happy for the rest of his life when he thought of himself drifting alone between various great cosmos in the future. He felt suffocated in his heart when he thought of his former voice and smile. He was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. Chu Feng's soul light was trembling. He was about to throw the stone box into the great abyss. However, the yellow cattle was still there. It was crying in sorrow and had no one to rely on. Chu Feng endured it again. Tai Wu opened his mouth and said, "Everyone still has a bit of soul light that hasn't been extinguished. I'm a celestial sovereign, so I naturally have the means to make them reappear. What's your choice?" With a bang, his yellow cattle was also smashed into pieces and turned into a bloody mist. Chu Feng was trembling as he witnessed everything. He hated himself for not being strong enough. He roared as the blood on his soul light fell like bloody tears. He was in extreme pain and grief. You let them live. Even if there are 1,000 tribulations and endless sufferings, come at me. Chu Feng's voice was hoarse. He couldn't stand steadily and was swaying. Even his soul light was flickering indeterminately. These brothers were all dead. Moreover, they were willing to die for him after they heard that they could let him live. Chu Feng's head was about to explode. His anger and grief were burning. He couldn't accept such an ice-cold and cruel ending. His soul light was dripping blood. Yao Yao had long since risked her life. She couldn't hold on any longer, but she still moved forward with her sword. She danced across the cosmic void and fought with Tai Wu with all her might. She had always been aloof and clear, but now her beautiful eyes were red with hot tears flowing down her face continuously. Bang! Tai Wu pierced through the void and opened up a wormhole. He stretched out a large hand and entered a certain star domain again. He directly detained two people from an unremarkable small planet and threw them in front of the great abyss. These were Chu Feng's parents. The old weasel and another divine teacher had long since deduced the whereabouts of the people by Chu Feng's side and reported them to the higher-ups. Now, Tai Wu also made a move against these two people. Dad, Mom. Chu Feng looked at his father and mother. He couldn't help but tremble as he glared at Tai Wu. Bang! Tai Wu didn't say anything. He shook lightly and Chu Ziyuan and Wang Jing turned into a bloody mist in the blink of an eye. Chu Feng was like a wounded beast. He faced the sky and let out a long howl. Even his own parents had died. They were obliterated just like that. He felt that his body was about to explode in the great abyss. At the final juncture, he saw his parents open their mouths to say something to him before they died. Looking at the shape of their mouths, they wanted him to live on properly. At the final juncture, the two of them were still so concerned about him and worried about him. In extreme despair, Chu Feng faced the sky and roared. Then, he knelt there and his whole body was trembling. There's not much time now. Even I won't be able to keep the last bit of their soul light after a while, said Tai Wu. Chu Feng felt humiliated. The other party didn't mention a single word about the stone box, but it was very obvious that he wanted him to offer it respectfully. At this moment, he was laughing and crying. The blood that had condensed with his soul light was flowing like scarlet tears. What did his lowliness count for? As long as those people could come back to life, he was willing to pay everything. Chu Feng was completely disheartened. He raised his hand and raised the stone box. He really wanted those people to come back to life, but he was also unreconciled. He really wanted to kill Tai Wu. Seeing Chu Feng raise the stone box, Yao Yao's sword light flourished even more fiercely. She was burning herself. She really hoped that she could suppress Tai Wu and force him to resurrect everyone. Seeing Chu Feng raise the stone box, Great Wu smiled faintly. This was the first time he smiled so brilliantly. His whole body blossomed with an auspicious rain of light. That's right. It's just a narrow space in the nether world. The whole world is filled with ants. How dare they defy heaven's will? He said calmly. Chapter 946. Tai Wu's body stiffened. He was a celestial venerable, but he felt a chill run down his spine from head to toe. What level of an evolver was he? Even if he only used the energy of the Illuminator level, it was still terrifying. Moreover, his divine instincts were still there, but he didn't sense anything beforehand. Now, he suddenly heard someone sigh beside his ear. Even Tai Wu felt a chill and apprehension. Chu Feng had a sorrowful expression. He had also heard that sigh. Even at the darkest moment of his life, he knew that this matter was extraordinary. He had always known that his heart wasn't cold enough and couldn't be hard and cruel to the end. He was willing to be humble as long as his family and friends died one by one, as long as they were resurrected. If he could start over, he hoped that he would be flawless and could follow his heart all the way to the end. At this moment, Tai Wu's body was tense. The stone embryo was sparkling and divine light surged violently. He couldn't calm down and could no longer look down on the universe indifferently. Suddenly, he retreated rapidly, and the energy around his body became denser. Qi and blood filled the air, and all kinds of energy bodies densely covered the surroundings. He was going to fight. Impossible, he whispered, revealing a fearful expression. That was because he had found the source of the sigh. Although it seemed to come from the depths of the universe, Tai Wu finally determined that it actually came from the depths of the abyss. Prior to this, the people of the Yang realm had conducted all kinds of tests and experiments to monitor the radiation value of this place. They clearly understood the root of the danger here. Tai Wu already knew that there was an extremely ancient and terrifying evolver here at the great cosmos level. People at this level were almost at the end of their evolutionary path. Outsiders simply didn't know what they would become after reaching this step, but one thing was certain: they were on the verge of death and were already at the end of their declining period. The great martial Heavenly Venerable had personally deduced that the existence in the abyss was already dead. It had entered this so-called declining period and couldn't wake up at all. This was a creature that was sleeping and waiting for its final moment of death to arrive. As long as one didn't provoke it or use energy above the god level to activate its instincts, it wasn't a big deal even if the species it evolved into was extremely terrifying. The great martial Heavenly Venerable suppressed himself and didn't use any god-level methods to stimulate the great cosmos-level creature. He firmly believed that this creature wouldn't wake up, but the truth was right in front of him. The ancient existence in the Yang realm had already awakened and let out a sound. "Are you an ancient person from the Yang realm?" The stone body spoke, stabilizing his mind. Back then, the Yang realm was in great chaos. For some unknown reason, a few powerhouses suddenly started a war and fought in the heavens. Some people were seriously injured and on the verge of death. They brought the treasures of the Yang realm with them to choose their burial ground. The great abyss of the Nether realm was considered to be an extremely terrifying grave. Now, the Almighty of the most ancient era, the era where even the Tai Wu was not born, had woken up and was sighing in the tomb. How could he not feel cold? When you look down on ants like a dragon, have you ever thought that a dragon is also looking down on you? Below the great abyss, a weak and decaying voice sounded. It was extremely soft, full of lethargy, carrying the reminiscence of the past, as well as the great changes of one's life. Yao Yao had already stopped and retreated to the side. Up to this point, the Mother Gold Divine sword in her hand had been shattered and turned into a dozen or so fragments. When some of them flew back, they pierced into her own flesh. The scene was momentarily silent. The Taiwu Tianzuan's expression was solemn. After a moment, he said, "Without such a creature, who would dare to look at a celestial as an ant? Not even you." A smooth, round mirror appeared beside him. It actually reflected the blurry scenery of the great abyss. It was absorbing the energy radiating from here and carrying out deductions. On the surface of the mirror, various patterns interweaved and many symbols appeared. The Taiwu Tianzuan was uneasy and took the risk to use a celestial treasure to probe the situation below. "In reality, you can't kill anyone," the Taiwu Tianzuan said to himself. His gaze gradually became resplendent and he gradually became more confident. He was convinced that this ancient existence was weaker than he had imagined. Even if he spoke now, it was just an empty shell. He simply couldn't make a move. Rather than saying that this great cosmos-level evolved being had revived, it would be better to say that a wisp of his will reverberated in this burial ground like a ghost and issued his final voice. "Yes, I'm powerless to make a move. Moreover, I've never killed any creature here." The aged voice was very calm and unperturbed. But after hearing the words of the great cosmos-level evolved being, the Taiwu Tianzuan became apprehensive for the first time. In the past, there had been celestial venerables who had entered the nether world and disappeared forever. Could it be that this person had killed them when he could still make a move? This horrified him. There were dangers in the nether world that he didn't understand? The reason he dared to come here was because he had detected the aura of decay radiating from the great abyss. He clearly understood the state of the evolved being here, but now it seemed that he had overlooked something incomparably important. The Taiwu Tianzuan turned around and left. His body broke through the cosmos space and was about to escape into the primal chaos. The weak and aged voice rang out. Although it was ordinary, It sounded like a thunderclap in the Taiwu Tianzuan's ears, making his blood run cold. Although I'm not a native of this world, I have a sense of belonging after sleeping here. Don't you, the Azure Dragon, look down on everything? Come in and take a look. The Taiwu Tianzuan immediately regretted his actions. He had wasted too much time here and had actually awakened this evolved being that had been quietly waiting for death. A great accident had occurred. He was traversing, and the endless sea of stars appeared behind him. He firmly believed that there wouldn't be any mishaps once he entered the primal chaos. However, at this moment, he felt a chill from head to toe. He couldn't control his body and actually began to fly backwards. He rapidly returned along the path he came from and fell into the great abyss with a bang. The Taiwu Tianzuan roared. This was the first time he had lost control of himself like this. He was no longer calm and aloof, and he was no longer able to look down on the entire nether world. He was resisting and releasing his own energy without holding anything back. Powerful fluctuations shot out from his body as ancestral Taoist matter pervaded the air. Could simply destroy the world. The laws and order of the netherworld were in disorder and were being suppressed by him. Unfortunately, he had just revealed the true strength of an Empyrean when he was suppressed by a formless energy. He actually couldn't move and fell straight into the pitch-black depths of the great abyss. Even his heart was trembling. After becoming an Empyrean, who could detain him? Who could control his body like this? The great abyss was boundless. He continuously fell and let out a long roar, but he couldn't control his body at all. It was like an iron filament being sucked in by a giant magnet. He couldn't struggle free. In the blink of an eye, he understood that the more celestial venerable level energy he released, the faster he fell. He was heading towards that terrifying end and was progressing at an even faster pace. However, when he restrained his own aura and suppressed it to the Illuminator realm and even the Saint realm, he discovered that it was useless. The trend had already been set and couldn't be changed. The Taiwu Tianzuan felt that he was wrong. The so-called dying person in the great abyss and the so-called decaying to the point where only obsession was left was probably just his wishful thinking. Otherwise, how could he be pulled down like this? He felt a headache coming on because he was about to face an evolved body of the great cosmos. When the path of the predecessors wasn't enough, no one knew what would happen when a life form of this level advanced towards the ultimate evolved body. As such, even the Taiwu Tianzuan didn't know what this terrifying evolution from a long time ago had become. Was it a human, a beast, a variant, or something else? Boom. He no longer restrained himself and erupted with the strongest energy in the depths of the great abyss. He wanted to resist to the end and fight with his life on the line. His body was becoming bigger, causing the star remains along the way to explode and turn into fine powder. Compared to him, those so-called broken planets were too small. The celestial venerable body obliterated everything and nothing in the world could stop it. He burned fiercely and the ancestral Tao matter surged as he released it to his heart's content. Soon after, he saw the bottom of the great abyss. Then, his scalp went numb as he saw a part of the truth. In the darkness there were corpses sitting one after another. They were all incomparably large, and the stars in front of them weren't even comparable to dust. What was this? Heavenly deities. There wasn't just one heavenly deity corpse, but many of them. They were already ice-cold. Even if their bodies were unbreakable throughout the ages, there was still a decaying aura pervading the air. They were all too large and surrounded by stars. These heavenly deities had all died here. The Taiwu Tianzuan felt a chill run down his back. Even though he was a stone embryo, he still felt goosebumps all over his body and his scalp was tense. Even though his body was brilliant and emitting dazzling radiance, ancestral Tao matter seeping out and illuminating all directions, he still couldn't illuminate the entire great abyss. The bottom was still dusky and he could only vaguely see everything. Meanwhile, at the very end of the great abyss, there was a creature that was decaying, and cold. It still carried the slightest bit of vitality. That should be an evolved body of the great cosmos level. When the Taiwu Tianzuan saw this, his body immediately trembled violently, his scalp about to explode. As an Empyrean, he actually had this type of experience, this type of horror. This is a great cosmos-level creature. There is no path ahead, so it ultimately transformed into this? He wanted to retreat, but he couldn't succeed. The Taiwu Tianzuan lost his composure. He couldn't maintain his calm at all. He struggled with everything he had. That place was extremely dark and normal people couldn't see anything. Only the Taiwu Tianzuan could see the truth. "What exactly are you?" he shouted in a low voice. "I am merely a failure on the path of evolution, nothing more." A weak and decaying voice sounded from that place. "Didn't you say that you wouldn't take action and that you didn't have the ability to take action?" Taiwu's back went cold. He felt as if his life was in danger. Something bad was about to happen. "Yes. Then you." Taiwu's voice was trembling. The instant he felt death descend, he became completely uneasy. His heart was pounding and his entire body went taut. Then, he moved forward and quickly attacked. He released the most terrifying attack. Endless ancestral Tao matter, all types of energy bodies, as well as forbidden techniques and other things were all released. However, everything was futile. He felt as if his body was withering up, becoming weak, heading towards decline. Then, he saw that there was a pitch-black cave behind the evolved body. It was sending the Empyrean towards the end of his life. The other Empyreans had also died because of this. "What is that?" Taiwu was trembling. The life aura within his body was sharply decreasing. He knew that he was about to die without any hope. "You should have guessed it," the evolved body said. Could it be? Taiwu couldn't control himself. His body was rumbling and swaying, and his soul was splitting into pieces. He was about to die in a sitting posture. Suddenly, the pitch-black cave became extremely dazzling. A rain of light sprinkled down, golden and incomparably divine. The blazing heat was difficult to resist. Chapter 947. To think that I, Taiwu, could move unhindered through the heavens and killed countless. I looked down on a glorious great era and swept through all opponents in the same world. Only then did I rise to power. After endless years of torment, I established a Tao Earth, created an extreme breathing technique, and became the ancestor of a sect. In the end, I have to experience this kind of death tribulation. I have to silently wait for death. How sad and laughable! The stone body spoke. He was unwilling but helpless. His eyes dimmed and his gaze became lax. His soul light was disintegrating and splitting into pieces. The ancestral Tao substance continuously drifted away. He sat there cross-legged, unable to move at all. The vitality around his body was rapidly flowing away. His Tao body was rapidly deteriorating, and a decaying aura lingered around his body. A heavenly deity of a generation was falling. There was no turning point. No matter how great his divine abilities were, he could only walk step by step towards the end of his life here. He was helpless and unwilling. He let the soul light within his body struggle and burn indiscriminately, but it was all futile. He couldn't change anything at all. In front of him, there were enormous heavenly deity true bodies that were even more majestic than him. According to seniority, they were all far older than him. Their identities and origins were so great that it was frightening. However, they had long since passed away in a sitting posture. They couldn't break free from this hopeless situation. These heavenly deities were arranged and sat cross-legged. This was a choice to die with dignity and also helplessly bury themselves. There was no hope to speak of after falling here. In the final moments of his life, Tai Wu stared at the pitch-black cave in front of him. From time to time, it would shine, and from time to time, it would become deep and dark. At the same time, he was also looking at the terrifying creature that made him feel incomparably fearful, the evolved great cosmos body. If news of its appearance were to spread, the world would be greatly shaken. This made people deeply feel the terror of the end of evolution. Tai Wu fell here. After looking for a long time, he still felt horrified. He saw one of the world's greatest secrets, but he couldn't bring this information back to the world of the living. He couldn't even transmit it outside the great abyss. The entire world was boundless. All the powerhouses were exploring and searching, but they didn't know that there was a part of the truth and answers here. There was no path ahead of evolution. There was a cave here, and there was an evolved great cosmos body here. There were some answers here, as well as the disastrous remnants and truth. When you looked down on ants like an azure dragon, did you ever think that there was also an azure dragon looking down on you? At the last moment, he heard these words again. His eyes were lifeless as he silently awaited death. At this moment, at the edge of the cosmos, the group of people who followed Tai Wu over all felt their bodies turning cold. It was as though they had fallen into hell. Tai Wu was a supreme heavenly sovereign in their eyes, but he was swallowed by the abyss just like that. The two Tao children cried loudly, and the others were also shivering. Even the celestial venerables had encountered a death tribulation. This netherworld universe far exceeded their imagination. It was no wonder that the other Empyreans weren't willing to rashly step foot here. Only the extreme martial Empyrean was incomparably anxious because of some problems. He longed for those two supreme treasures that had been lost in this part of the universe, so he hurried over and risked his life. But in the end, an accident really did happen. However, this was not the end. This group of people suddenly discovered that an invisible force had imprisoned them. It pierced through the primal chaos mist, and the influence of time was beyond the scope of the Een realm. No! Someone cried out loudly. There were experts among the evolvers who had followed Tai Wu here. They were true deities, but in the end they were led away and flew towards the depths of the netherworld. The two Tao children cried out in fright and turned around to leave. In the end, the few deities were swallowed into the abyss and fell down. They struggled like ordinary creatures that were drowning. Among them were the white fox, the three-legged flying dragon, and the human race's deity-level powerhouses, but they all met the same fate. They were unable to break free and fell to the bottom of the abyss. When they saw the extreme martial Empyrean on the verge of death, they wanted to cry out loudly, but in the end, they discovered that they couldn't say anything. They didn't even have the strength to open their mouth. Even the Empyrean was sitting here waiting for death. What else could they change? At the same time that these people's hearts were like dead ashes, they quickly began to die. Blazing radiance circulated in that black hole, and supreme power filled the air. They turned into dust in a breath's time. A gust of wind blew through the mysterious hole, and they vanished like smoke in thin air. These were all powerhouses that were known as gods among the evolvers. In the end, they died just like that without any value. No one in the world knew what happened to them in the end. The netherworld universe was in a clamor, and all the evolvers were in an uproar. The extreme martial Empyrean had been swallowed, and even the few deities that had followed him here had disappeared. The greatest calamity of the netherworld had passed just like that? What about Chu Feng? What about his relatives and friends? A few legendary guests were gazing into the distance at the abyss. At this moment, the evolvers of every race wanted to know the answer. But they couldn't see anything because the heavenly eye couldn't capture the scene. The abyss swallowed the sky. In the process of sucking in the extreme martial Empyrean and the few deities, even the nearby heavenly eye disappeared. Outside the abyss, the ancestral demon's cauldron shone resplendently. It had already done its best to absorb the bloody mist into the cauldron. even though the odds were against it, and it might not be able to save the people who had passed away. But it really did try its best. In fact, it had suffered serious damage itself. There were many cracks on it, and it had almost been pierced through by a casual finger of the extreme martial Empyrean. The fine marks on the cauldron's walls were like spider webs. "I can't hold on any longer." It was trembling. Now wasn't the era when it followed the ancestral demon, and it was no longer a divine cauldron. But it was still going to be swallowed by the abyss and sent flying. "Shrink!" shouted Chu Feng with grief. He didn't know how his parents, the black yak, the yellow cattle, and Zhou Quan were doing. There were no deities in this world, so who could save them? Moreover, so much time had passed. They had been delayed and missed the best opportunity. Could they still be saved? Who could defy the heavens? Was it Yao Yao? She couldn't even protect herself. Only after the great battle stopped did she realize how serious her injuries were. She had almost died and her Tao had vanished. Buzz. The ancestral demon's cauldron shrunk to the size of a fist and turned into a ball of gentle light. It rushed toward Chu Feng and was collected into the stone box. "Yao Yao, come quickly," shouted Chu Feng. He was worried that an accident would happen to her. There was a lot of grief, but he couldn't allow himself to be greatly grieved. Even though they didn't have divine-level energy fluctuations, they were still somewhat affected now. They were about to be swallowed by the great abyss destructive power. At this moment, even Chu Feng himself was struggling. His soul light condensed with blood and entered the stone box. Unfortunately, it didn't have a lid, so he had thrown it into the darkness in a fit of anger. At this moment, there were many tears on Yao Yao's battle skirt. They were all torn by the Taiwu's secret technique. One could imagine what kind of terrifying attack she had endured. Blood was dripping from the space between her brows. The finger mark from before was spreading. It wasn't that she wasn't hurt, but she had suppressed it. Now it was reflected. The space between her brows had been pierced and there was a terrifying energy eroding it. In addition, there were a few stone fragments in her hair with blood. That was the Taiwu deity's trump card. It was an innate object peeled off from the stone embryo. The stone had originally gathered into needles, but Yao Yao had blocked it with the sword embryo. Now the divine sword was broken and the stone weapon had turned into fine powder, but it still injured her. In addition, there were many wounds on Yao Yao's body. Her own sword had been broken into more than 10 pieces, and some of the fragments flew back and pierced into her body, causing blood to gush out. "Yao Yao!" Chu Feng's soul light wrapped around the stone box and rushed over to receive Yao Yao. Yao Yao's eyes were slack now. There was a big problem. Although he knew that Yao Yao's corporeal body had survived in the abyss for many years, the current situation wasn't right. There might be a celestial venerable perishing below, and he was afraid that Yao Yao would be affected. In the end, the stone box and Yao Yao fell together and sank into the darkness. Chu Feng felt a destructive aura. He was about to perish and quickly pulled Yao Yao into the stone box. It was very crowded now, and the small world inside was only a square meter. Then he fainted in the process of falling and became unconscious. There was an indescribable fluctuation at the bottom of the abyss that was suppressing his soul light. After a long time, Chu Feng woke up. His soul light was still there, condensing his own blood. He was in the stone box and rising continuously in the darkness. He saw Yao Yao flying out of the abyss with the stone box in her hand. Her eyes were still dim. He called out to her repeatedly, but she didn't respond at all. She was sending him out instinctively. The lid of the box was also there. It had been found. When Chu Feng and the stone box left the abyss together, Yao Yao pushed him out as though she had exhausted the last of her strength. Then she fell straight down with her back facing the sky. Her eyes were incomparably empty, and were no longer as empty as before. "Yao Yao!" shouted Chu Feng. He had lost too many people today. He really couldn't accept losing Yao Yao as well and was about to throw himself down. Leave this place. Once we go down, we'll all die without a doubt. Moreover, we can't change anything at all unless you can fully activate this stone box and truly control it. The demon ancestral cauldron transmitted its voice to warn Chu Feng. Yao Yao. Chu Feng was too reluctant to part with her. He looked at Yao Yao, whose hair was in a mess and was falling straight down. He didn't know how she was in the end. At the last moment, her eyes were so empty and without a bit of luster. Chu Feng was extremely afraid. But the demon ancestral cauldron was right. He still couldn't jump down and throw his life away. There was still blood mist and relatives inside the demon ancestral cauldron. He had to bring them away and bring them back to life. But could anyone really come back to life? Chu Feng didn't know. This day was the darkest day of his life. His heart was in so much grief that it was numb. He had lost too many people. Yao Yao. He called out in pain. Could he not hold back even the last person? I believe that nothing will happen to her. She's the number one under the ancient starry skies. In the present world, she can fight a celestial venerable and slay Taiwu. Such a heaven-bestowed woman won't die like this. Moreover, she was originally revived in the abyss. Perhaps staying behind is her intention. There will be a day when she reappears. The Yang realm will turn upside down because of her. The demon ancestral cauldron transmitted its voice to encourage Chu Feng. It was giving him hope, making him high-spirited and encouraging him to be full of fighting spirit. Chu Feng suddenly raised his head and roared at the sky. His voice was like thunder and shook the starry skies. I won't sink into depravity. I want to kill my way into the Yang realm. Taiwu's true body isn't dead yet. He's in the Yang realm enjoying the worship of countless creatures in the world. I want to kill my way over. He was like a wounded lone wolf who had lost everything. He had no companions, no parent. He let out a long howl between the heaven and earth. Within the desolation, there was unwillingness and unyielding. Chu Feng's soul light surged and his blood was condensing. He wanted to reconstruct his true body. He wouldn't fall into despair after this setback. He wanted to kill his way into the Yang realm. He wanted to rise and slay the Taiwu's true body. In addition, there were still the three great celestial venerables Hunyi, Primordial, and Luanyu. They were all his enemies. The Yang realm was in chaos because of them, and they had killed too many people. Red Spider Lily, Thunder God, Skyblade, do you guys have spirits? I'll fight with you again in the Yang realm. Chu Feng roared loudly. He wanted to penetrate the starry skies and call upon the true spirits and remnant souls that could go through life and death with him. He wanted to kill his way into the Yang realm. Chapter 948. Chu Feng was very tired. Even though there was a flame burning in his heart and his fighting spirit was aroused, this huge unforeseen event had exhausted him mentally and physically. How could he not be in pain and grief as his relatives and friends died in front of him one by one? Outside the great abyss was endless darkness. He only calmed down after a long time. His soul light swayed many times and his blood was also shining, but he couldn't reconstruct his corporeal body. It was too painful. Not only his heart, but also his body. This was a death calamity and endless sorrow. He staggered into the distance and walked alone. Find a place to revive old black, yellow cattle and the others. Chu Feng said softly. He was very haggard and nervous. He was afraid that those people would never be there after he opened the ancestral demon cauldron's lid. At this moment, the ancestral demon cauldron had also sunk into a deep sleep. Its body was full of scars and had almost been pierced through. This battle, this calamity, no matter if it was man or weapon, they had all experienced the greatest torment. To be able to survive and exist in this world was truly not easy. The cauldron's walls were dyed with blood, but it was dark and without the luster of life. Whose was it? Chu Feng's heart was trembling. He was intensely uneasy. After leaving the great abyss for a bit and arriving at a quiet place, Chu Feng was about to open the cauldron's lid. His hands were trembling and he was actually terrified in his heart. This was completely different from his former decisiveness. It was because he cared too much. Don't move. There's a world within my body that can temporarily preserve my current state. You and I are both on the verge of death and are powerless to reverse the situation. The ancestral demon cauldron was roused and reminded him like this. It was undergoing nirvana and brewing its vitality. Back then, it pierced through the Shilin and deity planet and swallowed endless essence. Its body contained a sea of mountain and river essence energy. Everything stopped deteriorating in the special life field within its body. Chu Feng's hand stopped. He really didn't dare to rashly open the bloody cauldron's lid. Now, he actually felt as if he had been relieved of a heavy burden. It was better to have hope than despair. In this short period of time, he felt rather strenuous. Even his soul light was somewhat dim, and he felt waves of weakness. He had endured too much pressure just now. Go home. When his body and mind were at their most exhausted, for the first time, he felt a sense of loneliness and helplessness. He wanted to go back. He wanted to go back to the place that was once filled with laughter. Earth, Kunlun, his own courtyard, and Mount Eternal. These were all the warm places he could recall. He was really very weak and had almost died here. Even though he was lucky enough to survive, he only had a dim soul light and some blood left. His bones and physical body had all been destroyed. Gazing at the faint stars at the end of the darkness, Chu Feng stood there quietly. He circulated his spirit-breathing technique and stabilized his soul injury. His soul flame pulsed and gradually became more vigorous. For the time being, he did not want to make a deal with the Wormhole Express Company to open a wormhole. He was very wary of them. At this stage, he could only trust himself. Brother-in-law. There was someone who came from the cold void, the voice young and tender, carrying a sobbing tone, whimpering, searching frantically in this region outside the great abyss. She was Ying Xiaoxiao. The silver-haired little Lolita brought along an old servant from the quasi-immortal race and hurried over here. She shed tears of anxiousness as she searched this area unceasingly. Brother-in-law, where are you? The first forbidden area of the pitch-black Yin realm was cold and silent since time immemorial. It was cut off from the rest of the world, and no living creatures could be seen all year round. It was only recently that there were traces of humans here. Ying Xiaoxiao cried because she couldn't find him. She didn't discover anything and only her voice was drifting in the air as she sobbed softly. After a while, there were many figures outside the great abyss. A few more people arrived and made use of a few super wormholes to quickly rush over here and wander back and forth in this region. But the great abyss was extremely vast and boundless. Ordinary people seemed very insignificant when they came here. Even if they sensed it with their divine senses, it wasn't enough. There were people traversing soundlessly on spatial secret treasures at an extremely fast speed as they weaved through the great abyss. They held a treasured mirror in their hands that emitted beams of light to illuminate the area ahead. Among them, there were famous people who had survived from ancient times. There were also people covered in large black cloaks and evolvers who wore special masks that couldn't be sensed. There were many people who came with different objectives. Some people were worried about Chu Feng and really wanted to know whether he had survived or not. There were also people who coveted the Yang realm's secret treasures after the celestial venerable passed away and wanted to obtain them. There were even people who heard the Yang realm's people's discussions and knew that Chu Feng had a supreme treasure on him that moved the great martial celestial venerable to the extent that he didn't hesitate to descend personally. Many people were tempted. What kind of ultimate item was that? It was very quiet outside the great abyss, but the people's hearts weren't. There were many warm-hearted people who brought along their friends. They came for Chu Feng and wanted to find him so that they could participate in the rescue. Many people had a good impression of Chu Feng after such a great calamity occurred and the starry skies shook. They strongly hoped that he could still be alive. But in the end, there were also some evolvers who came with bad intentions. The human heart was complicated and couldn't be predicted. The great martial celestial venerable had been swallowed, and even the few god-level evolvers who followed him had died here. The Een realm was at peace and the external pressure immediately disappeared. Normally speaking, even if Chu Feng was still alive, he would be crippled and wouldn't live for long. Some people's thoughts weren't pure and wanted to find the stone box by hook or by crook. That was something that even the celestial venerable yearned for, so how could the greed of the Een realm's universe be locked up? In the quiet land, Chu Feng's soul light swayed and gradually became much more vigorous. He suddenly opened his eyes and a purple golden bamboo appeared in his hand. The demon ancestor's cauldron also revived. A lot of people came. The demon ancestor's cauldron told him that no matter how weak it was still considered one of the most powerful weapons in this part of the starry skies. It was extraordinary and refined. Others saw that it was full of cracks and was already crippled, but it held on. It asked Chu Feng if he wanted to meet some people or start a massacre? Return to Earth and save Yellow Cattle and the others. Chu Feng didn't want to complicate matters. Time was too precious and he had too many regrets on this day. He hoped that he could make up for it. When the demon ancestor's cauldron shone, Ying Xiaoxiao finally found this area and discovered them. She ran over weeping and was very worried. They weren't family, but they were more like family. A group of people had gone through trials and tribulations and lived and died together in the foreign realm for 100 years. She was incomparably afraid and worried that Chu Feng had already died here. She suddenly saw his soul light and found it so familiar. She immediately started crying and laughing. Chu Feng stopped and watched her run over. Brother-in-law, this is a large pill refined from a portion of the divine medicine's leaves. I stole it from the number 1 heaven medicine dispensary. Eat it quickly. She presented a treasure with tears on her face as she carefully held a jade jar and handed it over. There were other medicinal powders as well. Chu Feng felt warm in his heart and a warm current flowed in his heart. He raised his hand and stroked her head, but he was in his soul light state now and the feeling was different after he touched her. Moreover, he couldn't eat medicinal powders and the like right now. There's a special medicine for healing soul light here. Hurry up and heal your injuries. Ying Xiaoxiao had a worried look on her face. She felt uneasy when she saw Chu Feng's soul light swaying. I'm fine, said Chu Feng. He told her that this place wasn't peaceful and that she should return to the quasi-saint race quickly. I want to protect you. She called out to that old servant and asked him to follow her to protect Chu Feng. She hoped that Chu Feng could recover sooner. My elder sister will come soon and so will my elder brother. They're all looking for you. Even though the saints in our race used to. She didn't continue speaking when she reached this point as she didn't want to mention those unhappy things again. She was powerless to refute the decisions made by those 3 ancient saints in the past. Yes, the saints of your race have arrived. Xiaoxiao, you can go back first. Goodbye. Chu Feng left. The demon ancestor's cauldron pierced through the void and brought him away as it hurried toward Earth. Chu Feng heaved a sigh of relief that this cauldron could recover to this extent. If not, he might have to face some dangers. His current state really wasn't good. He would save his parents, Yellow Cattle, and the others. After that, he would go to the Yang realm and disregard everything to cultivate and kill Taiwu. This was the thought in Chu Feng's heart. He prayed for everything to go smoothly and yearned for a miracle so that all those people in the cauldron could come back to life. He was filled with hope and obsession. Many people came from outside the abyss and it became more and more lively. Evolvers from various places and the leading figures of each race had arrived to search for Chu Feng's whereabouts. They revered the abyss and came with different objectives. I hope you can survive. Zi Luan Yuan Mo, and the others arrived under the accompaniment of their clansmen. They stood here for a long time. Yuan Shiqing, Yuan, Ing Wudi, and the others had also arrived. There was also the undead silkworm prince, whose race had been annihilated. They were all sighing softly while some people even burned joss paper to hold a memorial service. Not everyone thought that Chu Feng could survive. In the end, the abyss swallowed everything, and even the heaven's eye in the extreme, faraway regions disappeared. Some people who came with bad intentions were very low-key. They didn't act differently, but they couldn't find anything for a while. Ing Xiaoxiao was very tight-lipped and didn't tell anyone. She didn't tell anyone that Chu Feng was still alive. But the truth couldn't be concealed. Someone found a few strands of Chu Feng's blood in the starry skies. They were still active and had vitality. This was blood essence, so they determined that he might not be dead. For the time being, all the disturbances here had nothing to do with Chu Feng. He returned to Earth and buried himself and the demonic ancestors' cauldron among the famed mountains and great rivers. He laid down a shocking domain to revive himself and repair the cauldron. Now, all living things were reviving and the spiritual qi was dense. Earth had been nourished by the huge amount of mutant earth Chu Feng had collected and was completely activated. The mountains and rivers in every region produced essence like a great waterfall. All living things were intelligent, and even some rocks had developed consciousness. Even some old trees could open their mouths to speak. The demonic ancestors' cauldron was glowing. There was a bizarre space inside it, and some bloody mist was lingering and drifting in this special life field. It was being nourished by the intense life energy. All of you have to live. Chu Feng prayed every day that he wouldn't be like this in the past. But now, because he cared too much, he was afraid he wouldn't be able to see those people again. He was using the famed mountains and some special domains left behind by the Sage Master to restore himself and the demonic ancestors' cauldron. There was the weapon-nurturing domain and the body-nurturing domain. So much so that he even went to the moon and paid a visit to the Sage Master's temporary imperial residence. In the end, Chu Feng's face was pale. His flesh and blood emerged and was reconstructed with great difficulty. He was still alive, but could the others reappear in the world? The last place Chu Feng wanted to go was the Eastern Sea and enter the true dragon's lair. This place seized the fortune of heaven and earth, and was supported by the underwater mountains and rivers. It was an extremely precious land. In the personal notes of the domain researchers, there was mention of phoenix nests and dragon cave. If they could be truly arranged and used well, cultivators could sit cross-legged inside, while others could swallow mutant fruit. Meanwhile, domain experts could swallow the spiritual essence of the mountains and rivers. In Chu Feng's plan, he would use this kind of super method to find ancient immortal caves and ancestral veins once he entered the Yang realm. He would allow himself to rise violently. Otherwise, how could he slay Taiwu? Chapter 949. The blue waves of the eastern sea undulated as Chu Feng rowed a small boat alone, drifting on the surface of the sea. There was no one to talk to him as he silently entered the sea in a daze. On the way to Mount Eternal, Chu Feng had a sad expression on his face as he recalled the grand occasion when they had gathered together. There had been battles, dangers, but also heroism and laughter. They had once joined hands to capture and kill the innocuous divine physique Zhou Shang, the myriad star physique Su Qingxian, and the foreign allied forces. Of those who had gone through life and death together, he was the only one who had returned alive. Chu Feng was quiet and silent as he stood on the small boat. His silhouette seemed somewhat desolate as he sailed into the distance. As he neared the dragon lair, the eye of the sea was no longer hidden. Instead, it emerged from the sea and swallowed the wave. It looked extremely dangerous. Today, no dragoness appeared to receive him because she had already been killed by the Excalibur finger. Only a sliver of blood remained in the ancestral demon's cauldron, and it was unknown if she could appear again. Chu Feng was disappointed as he stared blankly at this place. Some people emerged from the sea in the distance. They were the people from Penglai Island and Fangzhong Island. They had been exploring the dragon lair recently, but unfortunately, they couldn't enter. They were stunned. When they emerged from the sea, they actually saw Chu Feng wandering here. Their expressions stiffened as they were extremely afraid of him. They secretly exclaimed that Chu Feng's life was truly tenacious. As expected, he didn't die. He could even come back alive after the great abyss had swallowed the Excalibur. No wonder there had been rumors in the starry sky recently that someone had found a few strands of his blood with activity outside the great abyss. He probably wasn't dead. Chu Feng was like a specter. He was silent and didn't look at them as he stood calmly on the surface of the sea. The people from the two islands braced themselves and respectfully and cautiously greeted Chu Feng. Their attitudes were very low. The person in front of them was someone who dared to fight to the death with the Yang realm. In addition to his previous fame, who wouldn't be afraid? Chu Feng didn't respond and was immersed in his own world. Upon seeing this, the people from the two islands immediately retreated and didn't disturb him. It's really Chu Feng. He survived. This is a big event. It will definitely be big news in the starry sky, a young man said excitedly. Shut up and pretend you didn't see anything. Hide it in your heart. An old man berated in a low voice. They had been very low-key during this period of time and had completely changed. Even when the people of the Yang realm invaded Earth, they didn't make any statements. The facts had proven that their choice at that time was incomparably correct. The people of Yingzhou had jumped out and tied up Mount Putua's Qianyi, Qianjia, and the others into space as proof of allegiance. What was the result? In the end, Immortal Abode Island was destroyed. Whoosh! On the surface of the sea, the small boat disappeared. Chu Feng entered the sea eye, broke into the folded space, and appeared in front of the dragon nest. The Earth's comprehensive recovery had turned this place upside down. As soon as he entered, he heard the roar of a dragon. A large green dragon coiled around him and swooped down towards him. Chu Feng stood there without moving. That was draconic energy and not the resurrection of a true dragon. He held the magnetic marrow seal in his hand and pressed it forward lightly. Domain runes erupted in the vicinity and the large dragon disappeared. This seal was a treasure in the eyes of domain researchers. It had been seized from the Origin magnetic sacred physique and could be used to execute domain techniques with twice the results with half the effort. The dragon lair was different. The old land beneath the sea was still in ruins, but it had also revealed a much more majestic area. Chu Feng could even see the soil stained with scarlet dragon blood and a few half-exposed dragon scales. Additionally, there were large patches of thunderstruck wood, all of which were important materials for building dragon nests. Now they were emitting wisps of vigorous yang energy and exuberant vitality. In this area, there were clusters of dragon's bloodgrass. They were fragrant and emitting scarlet multicolored light. These were all great medicines. In the distance, there was an ancient cave carved into the side of the mountain. Waves of draconic cries rang out and there were many thunderstruck trees. There were also reverse scale flowers and dragon embryo trees inside. They were swaying with divine multicolored light and blossoming with auspicious colors. They were filled with a strong fragrance and had all ripened. Within the cave, the draconic energy was surging and astonishingly dense. Chu Feng began to move. Piece after piece of magnetic stones, many of them containing divinity and were priceless materials, were arranged here by him. He was making arrangements according to the methods recorded in the Sage Master's inheritance he obtained from the moon. He was changing the dragon nest into a nirvana dragon cave. That day, the sky and earth were turned upside down under the sea eye. A myriad of phenomena rang out as draconic cries and Tao cries resounded. The direction of the mountains and rivers at the bottom of the sea changed and were greatly affected. Many marine race members were astonished to find that many of the divine objects in the earth veins, the spiritual energy within the trenches, and the essence of the sea mountains had been drawn away and were gathering towards a certain direction. A dragon nest. They were astonished, but they immediately made some associations. They turned around and left one after another, not daring to linger in the vicinity. 2 days later, a grand nirvana dragon nest was completely remodeled. Chu Feng entered with the demonic ancestral cauldron and went deep into the ancient cave paved with thunderstruck wood. This was the core area of the former dragon nest. Dense immortal mist drifted about and divine energy fluctuated intensely. He didn't collect the dragon bloodgrass, reverse scale flower, or dragon embryo tree. These were all priceless great medicines. If they were released to the outside world, they would inevitably cause a huge commotion. In his eyes, everything here was in service of rebirth. He wanted to use the dragon nest as an immortal furnace to try and revive everyone. Chi. This area was activated. Countless symbols extended outward. Those were domain symbols blossoming. Chu Feng imitated the ancients, deducing the legends and truly arranging this type of land of rebirth. He didn't need to eat mutant fruits, but rather the essence of the mountains and rivers and the spiritual essence of the seabed. He used the dragon nest as a medium to gather everything and seize the natural luck contained within the world. Rumble. Heaven and earth trembled and all living things revived. Even the most ordinary stalk of grass in the dragon nest erupted with a dazzling rain of light. It gathered the divine splendor of countless earth veins and great ravines at the bottom of the sea. The dragon nest was like a divine furnace. This place was too divine and extremely dazzling. A rain of light rustled down. This was a rain of spiritual essence, a pure wave that nourished all living things. Chu Feng sat down. The demonic ancestral cauldron stood there, rumbling. Everything was progressing in an orderly manner, developing according to Chu Feng's arrangements. The power of rebirth pervaded the air, representing new life. Exuberant life energy surged. How is it? Chu Feng asked the demonic ancestral cauldron. He was apprehensive and uneasy. This was related to whether or not his family and friends could walk out alive. If even the land of rebirth didn't have any effects, then he truly was powerless. Everything would be for naught, and the sorrow and regret would be a heart-wrenching pain. The life field of my inner world has become more than 10 times stronger and is still increasing. However, it is almost at my limit. I don't know if they can survive either. The demonic ancestral cauldron wasn't certain. It had already done everything it could. Through this land of rebirth, it transmitted a sea of exuberant life force into its body. In this world, there were no heavenly deities. Moreover, they had already missed the optimal period of time Taiwu spoke of back then in the Great Abyss. Chu Feng and the demonic ancestral cauldron had no other way. They could only give it their all here. The sounds rang out incessantly, resonating with the mountains and rivers. Even in ancient times, this kind of scene was enough to shock the world. Someone was using the mountains and rivers to cultivate. This was definitely a major event in the evolutionary world. Ordinary domain researchers couldn't obtain this kind of inheritance because they simply didn't have this kind of method. In the past, there had been people who used the phoenix nest to transform and achieve a leap in life level. They became above the masses in one go, but those had already become legends. Now, the true rebirth was taking place. It swallowed the essence of the mountains and rivers and reproduced the grand scene recorded in the ancient books. For an entire 4 days, this place was filled with specks of scarlet multicolored light. White mist surged and golden light surged. Multicolored energy flowed and converged towards the center. The dragon blood grass, reverse scale flower, and dragon embryo tree grew frantically at first. After reaching the peak, they began to wither and all of their essence entered the main position of the land of rebirth. Doubtlessly, the demonic ancestral cauldron absorbed the most. It constructed a special life field in order to revive those people. Chu Feng sat to one side. Even if he didn't absorb it, it wouldn't miss him. His body was recovering, and even though his face was as pale as paper, his true strength was increasing. He was evolving passively. At first, he didn't want to absorb a strand of energy, but it surged into his body on its own. The essence here was too dense, and it would be a waste if he didn't consume it. In the end, it would overflow and spread out from the dragon nest. 8 days later, the white mist thinned and the energy gradually dried up. They had used this land of fortune to its limit. All the fortunes in the dragon nest and the drainage of the surrounding mountains and rivers had reached an end. Chu Feng didn't want to evolve, but his own strength had unknowingly increased. He had undergone a great rebirth and stepped into the saint realm. In his original place, he shed off his mortal shell. It split apart with the wind and turned into ashes. His physical body emitted light as his life level rose to a higher level. He had become the youngest saint in the present age. His soul light was also fluctuating violently like a vast and mighty tide. His spiritual power circulated, and his body shone with myriad rays of multicolored light. Chu Feng wasn't happy in the slightest. This kind of evolution didn't give him any sense of accomplishment at all. All he wanted was for his parents to come back to life. He had long since pondered over his own path of evolution. Everything before his eyes wasn't what he wanted. How could he kill Taiwu, Hunyi, and the other Empyreans with just these? He wanted to walk the path of the strongest. I only wish for you all to live. I want to hold a welcoming banquet for you all. I want to take you all with me to overlook the starry skies and dance with you all in the world of mortals. Chu Feng didn't ask for anything else. He only wished for them to live. He stretched out his trembling hand and touched the lid of the blood-stained cauldron. Then, he suddenly opened it. Chapter 950. The lid of the cauldron opened and a small world was formed inside. A bloody mist accompanied by dense life energy was churning and overflowing rapidly. It carried a faint smell of blood as well as waves of cold and desolate aura. Chu Feng froze on the spot. The vigorous life energy he sensed was absorbed by the ancestral demon's cauldron from the land of rebirth and not emitted by the bloody mist. In the blink of an eye, Chu Feng felt a chill from head to toe. He couldn't feel the familiar aura of his old friends. He didn't have their imprints and he couldn't see their soul light. His ears were buzzing and his vision was turning black. He was seeing stars and blood flowed silently from the corner of his mouth. He staggered and almost fell to the ground. Chu Feng felt as though he had been struck by lightning. He couldn't breathe and was about to suffocate to death. He couldn't hear anything and everything in front of him was pitch black. He supported the large cauldron powerlessly and his body was trembling. He once harbored some hope, but now it had turned into despair. He had always been anxious and uneasy in his heart. But when the lid of the cauldron was opened and this extremely cruel truth was exposed, it was still difficult for him to bear. He couldn't hear anything. Both his ears were deaf and his eyes were blurry. He couldn't see anything and there was only pain in his heart. He felt like he was sealed in an isolated dark space. Chu Feng's Adam's apple moved but he could only make a hoarse sound. He couldn't cry even if he wanted to. There were no tears and only pain. His soul was about to suffocate and his soul light dimmed as he sank into endless darkness. He couldn't struggle free and only felt endless suffering. He was walking alone in the sea of despair. There was no end to the dark space and the faint sea of bitterness. He felt like he was about to die. "Live, I only want you to live." His voice was hoarse and his body was trembling. He felt helpless and hopeless. This was completely different from the past him. He had never been so weak like a child. No one would have thought that this was Demon King Chu. His legs couldn't support his body and he was about to collapse. His corporeal body couldn't bear his soul light and was flickering violently. Blood was dripping from his mouth, nose, and ears. After that, 2 streaks of blood slid down from his lifeless eyes. Chu Feng wanted to cry, but he couldn't. He was like an injured beast trapped in a land of despair. He couldn't feel anything in the outside world, and he was really sealed in darkness. He unconsciously supported the big cauldron. It was as if his soul had lost itself and could not find its way back. His mouth made a muffled sound, but it was neither crying nor laughing. It was just a kind of uncomfortable hoarse cry. After an unknown period of time, Chu Feng was finally able to breathe again. He struggled out of the darkness, gasping for air. His entire body was drenched in cold sweat, and his clothes were completely soaked. There was only a bloody mist inside the cauldron. There were no living beings. Whether it was his parents or the yellow cattle, none of them had survived. They had all died. The ancestral demon cauldron remained silent and did not say anything. How could this be? Even though he had guessed the worst, it really happened. He still felt as if a knife was twisting in his heart, and he almost fainted. Dad, Mom, Yellow Cattle, Chu Feng called out their names. His tears finally flowed down as he recovered the corresponding bodily functions. He wanted to cry and howl. Everyone had died. Where is their soul light? Where are their true spirits? He searched with all his might. He searched the cauldron and the bloody mist, but he didn't see anything. Chu Feng was like an injured beast that had lost everything and was trapped on his own island. He howled deafeningly. He felt great sorrow in his heart, and it was difficult for him to restrain himself. He knelt on one knee here. He truly wished that he was just an ordinary person, and that he could spend his life peacefully with everyone else. Now there was nothing left. He was the only one left. His parents' faces, warm words, concerned gazes, and the voices and smiles of other people all emerged as if it was only yesterday. After a long time, Chu Feng staggered and left the dragon nest. After that, he suddenly leapt into the eastern sea. He didn't move at all in the ice-cold water. He followed the waves and unconsciously went into the distance. During this time, there were sea beasts that swam over. Only then did they open their bloody mouths and flee far away in fear, bringing with them large waves. Chu Feng didn't move at all. He closed his eyes and wanted to sleep forever. He didn't want to wake up. He once again isolated himself from the world in his heart, and all he thought about were those people. Boom! After a long time, a spiritual mountain at the bottom of the sea shook violently. This was a sign of intense recovery. It was like an active volcano erupting. A large area of spiritual energy waves appeared, and even the drifting Chu Feng was attacked. He opened his eyes. They were dim and lifeless, but he still stood up in the end. He was in a daze as he walked alone. He was incomparably lonely and desolate as he headed towards the dragon nest. There was pain and sorrow in his heart, but he couldn't cry. He could only silently walk towards the place that hurt his spirit and heart. He wouldn't run away, but it was truly hard to bear and his heart was in great pain. The ancestral demon's cauldron towered in the dragon nest's land of nirvana. It was still here, and it could only sigh at this result. Chu Feng knew from the very beginning that the chances of success were minuscule. Taiwu had once said that only a deity would have a way to save those people at the most optimal time, and there were no deities in the netherworld. But he still held on to some hope. He didn't ask for all of them to be revived, but he hoped that a few of them could reappear, even if they were just remnant souls. Now there was nothing left. When we were in the great abyss, even though their soul light was dissipating, there were still some left behind. Is there nothing left now? They've disintegrated and turned into energy matter. They're drifting about in the cauldron and are no longer soul light, the ancestral demon's cauldron informed. Chu Feng was dispirited and couldn't say anything. He carefully observed and sensed this kind of energy matter. His heart immediately went completely cold. This wasn't much different from Qin Luoyin's death. There was no longer a true spirit. Qin Luoyin's soul light should have disintegrated as well, but it was corroded by that golden matter and stuck together. It didn't disperse, but her true spirit had already dispersed. "You're all gone." Chu Feng silently shed tears. His life had experienced great ups and downs during these few days, and he had experienced the most difficult and bitter darkness. "Leave these matter behind. Don't bury them. I want to revive them," Chu Feng muttered with disappointment and sadness. He had lost his former sharpness. The soul light dissipated and divided into energy matter. In the end, these didn't disappear from the world and were suppressed by the ancestral demon's cauldron. Chu Feng held on to his last strand of hope as he waited for the light of dawn. In the end, the ancestral demon's cauldron shrunk. It discussed with Chu Feng that it wanted to enter the stone box and sleep. It felt that this was the Yang realm's most valuable treasure, and it was the weapon of the netherworld. It wanted to use this to sense it and see if it could recover. Chu Feng nodded and left this place with everything. Afterwards, he didn't say anything and didn't even shed a tear. He set off on his way alone just like that. He stood in the eastern sea and couldn't see the dragoness or the figure on Mount Eternal. He turned around and left. However, his silhouette was a little lonely. He was gloomy and didn't say anything by himself. Chu Feng returned to the mainland. It was quiet and desolate. This was his own lonely journey without anyone to accompany him. That group of friends who jested with him in the past would never appear again. He returned to the small town at the foot of Mount Taihang and to his small two-story house. Yellow cattle had lived here for a long time back then, but now it was very cold and deserted. It was already late at night. Chu Feng didn't turn on the lights. He came to the rooftop and looked at the dim starlight. He was in a daze and full of sadness. He grew up here during his childhood, and then moved away from this small town with his parents. Chu Feng lay on the rooftop without making a sound. He thought of his parents taking care of him here when he was young. They were afraid that he would be cold and afraid that he would be hot. They loved and protected him in all kinds of ways and watched him grow up. Those warm scenes and those two amiable faces seemed to appear in front of him all of a sudden. He reached out to touch them and approached them like he did when he was young, but there was nothing. His hands were empty and there was only the ice-cold night. Tears slid down from the corners of Chu Feng's eyes. He lay there silently. When the sky was about to brighten, he returned to his room and returned to his parents' bedroom. He sat there and then said nothing and didn't move. He stayed here for 3 days, constantly recalling every little detail of the past. All the experiences he had since he had memories of his childhood replayed in his heart. It was as if he had accompanied his parents on a journey again and lived together for more than 20 years. Then he left silently. No one knew that he had returned to his home in this small town. Chu Feng walked to the foot of Mount Taihang. In this mountainous region, he and Zhou Quan first met the yellow cattle. At that time, it was very mysterious and also very good at tormenting people. Zhou Quan was so angry that he kept calling it the bull demon. It was also precisely the yellow cattle that brought Chu Feng on the road of cultivation. In the early stages of the upheaval of heaven and earth and the recovery of the mountains and rivers, he began to evolve. His life's fate began to change from here. However, the yellow cattle was gone. Zhou Quan had also died and turned into a mist of blood. Even his soul light had disintegrated. He really wanted to see them again. When they were together, there was always joy and laughter. But now, he couldn't even speak. All he felt was lethargy. Chu Feng left. He walked through the mountainous region, passed through the forest, and headed all the way west. He arrived at Kunlun and sat on top of a mountain. He quietly watched the sunrise here alone. Back then, he drank in big bowls and ate big chunks of meat with a group of brothers. Even the old Lama and the old Grandmaster Wu Qifeng couldn't avoid being dragged into the water and raised their glasses with him. But now, the mountain breeze blew past, leaving behind a full sense of loneliness. Chu Feng took out a wine jar and poured cup after cup of wine. He drank a cup himself and then sprinkled the wine on the ground as a memorial to them. Brothers who have gone through life and death together, where are all of you? Who can fight shoulder to shoulder with me and charge into the world of the living? His words were blown away by the wind, leaving behind only a whimper. Chu Feng looked at the bright red rising sun but didn't feel any warmth. Here, he was very cold, lonely, and alone. His thoughts returned to the past as he sat on the mountain. During the Great War between the East and the West, it was at the foot of this mountain. The Mastiff King roared and fought against the Arctic King. The Rock King spread his wings and chased after the Black Dragon. The Black Yak contacted all parties and invited experts from all over the East. After the great battle, everyone chased and killed their way west. It was also at that time that he met the Siberian tiger, who didn't have any moral integrity. Not long after, the Tiger King helped Chu Feng fight Schiller on Mount Longhu, and they became friends who went through trials and tribulations together. Later on, their relationship became closer and the Tiger King also became a member of Mount Kunlun. There was also the old donkey with big buckteeth and pointed ears, as well as Ouyang Feng, who always looked at people with slanted eyes and constantly spitting saliva. They all joined Kunlun later on. Thinking of them would make people smile. But now, the mountain was silent. Everyone was already gone. Not long ago, this place was still very glorious. On the eve of the people of the Yang realm crossing over, all the races in the starry sky sent envoys to congratulate them. This place seemed to be flourishing, but in the end it changed overnight. Before the calamity came, Qin Luoyin brought the little Taoist to Earth to warn Chu Feng. The divination grandmaster felt something was wrong and predicted that the sky would split. As expected, everything came true. Chu Feng was lost in thought. He felt sad and regretful. The little Taoist was still here, but Qin Luoyin met with misfortune not long after she came here to deliver the letter and warn him to be careful. At this time, he really had a belly full of grief and indignation. He sat here and tightly clenched his fists. He was dejected and depressed. His parents, wife, and friends had left one by one. Although there were still many people and evolvers in this boundless world, he felt incomparably lonely. Chu Feng left Kunlun with tears hanging from the corners of his eyes. After a long time, he stood by the bank of the great river. Back then, he had brought Qin Luoyin and the little Taoist down the Yangtze River to admire the scenery along the way and see all the famous mountains and great rivers. When he arrived here, Chu Feng felt very tired. It was mainly because his heart was tired and his spirit was hurt. He lay on a bamboo raft and went down the great river. He didn't care and didn't care. He drifted wherever he wanted. He raised his head and looked at the sky. The figures of his parents, relatives, friends, and Qin Luoyin and the others appeared before his eyes again. He didn't want to move at all. He lay on the bamboo raft and went far away along the great river. This was his lonely journey. In the end, tears silently slid down from Chu Feng's eyes. He only looked at the sky and didn't want to do anything. His heart was very hurt. He missed those people, but he couldn't cry out loud. Chapter 951. Chu Feng lay on the bamboo raft. His eyes were dim and lifeless as he looked at the sky. He didn't make a sound as he drifted along with the great river into the distance. After an unknown period of time, the mist in the air gradually became thicker and the water flow gradually slowed down. He lay there and felt a strong energy and spiritual energy pervading the air. The sunset glow was very red, but it was somewhat like blood. It passed through the mist and sprinkled on this place. The dark red circulated and was somewhat sorrowful. Chu Feng sat up. Where was this place? He didn't know how long he had been drifting for. Now, he had entered a group of lakes. He carefully identified and silently recalled. He knew where this place was, Yunmeng Marsh. He sat quietly and no longer lay on his back. Chu Feng's state of mind gradually calmed down. The gloominess in his body was disappearing and his entire person was in the process of recovery. He knew that he couldn't sink into depravity. All the sorrow he should have had flowed out today. In the future, he wouldn't have time to be weak and depressed. From now on, he would become a demon king. The days still had to pass and the road still had to be walked. However, he had to premeditatedly conquer the Yang realm. To some people, he was destined to be called a great demon king. In truth, he didn't want to kill people. But having reached this step, how could he live up to the title of Demon King Chu if he didn't kill the celestial venerables and shake the major sects of the Yang realm? Actually, I only like to be a happy human trafficker. Chu Feng mocked himself. He didn't need to resent the world or blame himself. He dispelled his sorrow and only wanted to calmly walk on. He wanted to adjust himself and become a happy demon king. He knew that if his parents and those people were still alive, they would also want him to live happily. We'll meet again one day. It won't be too far away. Chu Feng jumped up and arrived in outer space. Since he had already considered his future path, he had to let go now and fight. He looked at the stars and the darkness. He raised his head and from now on, there would be no more tears. There was only fighting spirit and a smile. Although he couldn't smile now, he didn't want to carry a heavy burden and let the bitterness press down on him. He told himself that everything would get better. Gently patting the stone box, Chu Feng awakened the demonic ancestral cauldron inside. Time to wake up. He asked how the ancestral demon cauldron felt and how it was doing now. A small cauldron appeared, exuding an ancient aura. Most of the cracks on its surface had healed, but there were still some fine patterns that had yet to disappear. That day, the great martial heavenly lord's finger pointed over. Even though it was suppressed to the illuminator level, the superposition of various types of energy bodies was still terrifying. It was comparable to an attack from a deity. It's still lacking a bit of maturity. The demonic cauldron almost broke apart this time. It suffered heavy damage, so it needed a few rare materials to repair itself. Chu Feng took out a bracelet from the space inside the stone box. It was sparkling with starlight, and at the same time, there were tiny black spots on it, like the appearance of a black hole in the universe. This was the Star Mother Gold Bracelet, obtained from the myriad star physique Su Qingxian. It was the most precious crude Mother Gold weapon, and it had yet to develop its own complete order. Chu Feng handed it over and placed it into the cauldron, allowing the demonic ancestral cauldron to melt and absorb it. It had Mother Gold components on its own, so if its hands were slippery, it wouldn't be a problem for the cracks to be repaired. The demon ancestral cauldron was embarrassed. This great gift was seriously too precious. You should recover quickly. We still have some things to do. Chu Feng didn't allow it to decline. At the same time, he put on an even more special Mother Gold bracelet, the diamond chakram, on his wrist. Chu Feng steered the green bamboo boat and activated it with saint-level energy. He crossed the starry sky and found an ancient teleportation domain on an abandoned planet. From then on, he began to enter the depths of the universe again. He found an ancient mine in the starry sky. It was the place where the machine race's ancient Vajra ancestor had hibernated. This was the best place for metal lifeforms to heal. The demon ancestral cauldron stayed here and began to seize the time to recover. After that, Chu Feng set out on his way alone. The people from the Yang realm retreated. At least, they didn't dare to show themselves in the near future. The edge of the universe regained its tranquility, and the terrifying ship emitting surging yang qi could no longer be seen. Even a celestial venerable had fallen in the battle of the Great Abyss. The storm and influence it caused were really too great. Even though many days had passed, it was still the most popular topic. Of course, Chu Feng, Yao Yao, and the others, including the Thunder God and the Sky Blade, were also constantly mentioned. Chu Feng entered the most flourishing place in the Yang Realm universe, the abandoned city. The primogenitor of the dragon race, who had personally mentioned the #1 expert in the Yang Realm race, had once overseen this place. Tens of millions of years ago, the demon ancestral master had also overseen this place. This was his place of seclusion. Later on, this place was destroyed and turned into ruins. It was only 5 million years ago that it gradually prospered and became a transit station for various galaxies. It was the closest to the stars where the top 10 races of the universe resided. As a result, it once again flourished. The orthodoxy here couldn't be said to be very strong, but it was good at doing business. It gathered financial resources from all directions. There were many transaction records of divine medicines, breathing techniques, scriptures, and so on. Of course, there was no lack of secret treasures. Chu Feng came not for medicinal herbs or breathing techniques, but to take one last look at this universe. More importantly, he wanted to understand the current situation. You all sympathize with Chu Feng and feel that his, the Thunder God, and the Sky Blade's fates are too miserable. But I don't think so. It's like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Why bother? If they didn't engage in the so-called bloody battle, the Yang realm wouldn't be so miserable. Do you see? It's because these people didn't yield. In the end, the people from the Yang realm stretched out their hands and directly destroyed several stars. It's all because of them. In a bustling street, someone was talking loudly in a restaurant facing the street. This kind of words naturally caused a lot of people to be dissatisfied and clamor. How can you say that? Do you think that we should kneel here and wait for the people of the Yang realm to come over? Then, we'll decide our fate based on their mood. Whether we're killed, tortured, or let go, we shouldn't resist. The middle-aged man who spoke earlier sneered and said, "Attacking when you can't beat them? This is overestimating your own strength and is truly unwise." It's not that I want to criticize the Thunder God, but he really can't keep his integrity in his old age. He really shouldn't have attacked, and should have just retired peacefully. There's also that Chu Feng. That demon should know his place a little more. If he were to consider the overall situation, he should have been captured by the people from the Yang realm. In the end, he didn't give in. In order to kill him, the people from the Yang realm went to war and harmed many innocent people. Immediately, the group of people exploded. Someone reprimanded, "Why do I feel that you're born to be a wretched wretch? In your eyes, the people from the Yang realm are superior and powerful. Everything is right, but it's wrong for us to even resist?" That person shook his head and said, "It's always been like this. If we didn't jump out to engage in this so-called resistance, the people from the Yang realm might stop even if they killed a group of people. It's not that I want to criticize Heaven Blade, Thunder God, and Demon Chu, but they really overestimate their own strength." Naturally, this area couldn't calm down and a heated debate broke out. Although there were very few evolvers who agreed with that person's point of view, there were indeed a few people who made some of the older generation people's faces twitch in anger. They pointed at those people with flushed faces. "Scum, if you see the experts from the Yang realm coming over and making you kneel on the ground and not kill you, you'll feel that it's a great favor. If they throw you a few bones, will you wag your tail? The evolvers from our side, Thunder God, Flower of the Red Spider Lily, and Heaven Blade, go on expeditions and slaughter. Even if they bleed and lose their lives, they'll perish together with the enemy. You don't feel grateful because you're not strong enough. How servile! Who are you scolding, old man?" That middle-aged man was humiliated and angry. Chu Feng watched and listened quietly. After understanding the situation here, he was indifferent to life and death. He was about to go to the Yang realm cosmos, so he didn't care about these trivial matters at all. At this time, someone said, "You can be so stubborn. Chu Feng might not necessarily die like this, but if he comes out, he'll definitely slap you to death." That middle-aged man curled his lips in disdain and said, "After so many days, we've only found a few strands of so-called living blood he left behind. I reckon there's no value in it. This demon is already dead. Moreover, so what if he comes out? He should be half crippled. Besides, he has to be reasonable." "What reason is there to reason with you?" someone berated. Chu Feng listened for a moment and felt that it was too noisy. He walked over just like that, and suddenly the bustling place became extremely quiet. It was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Everyone was flabbergasted. Some people were trembling. Some were excited, and some were scared out of their wit. They were talking like this, and the main character had suddenly appeared. "Chu Feng, what are you doing?" The person who was talking nonsense just now was trembling in fear, and kept on retreating. Bang! Chu Feng didn't say anything and only pressed forward lightly. Then, this person started to disintegrate from his feet up and continuously disappeared. This person shouted in horror, "You can't do this! If you have something to say, we can talk it out. If you have something to say, we can talk it out slowly. You already said I'm a demon, so what's there to talk about? From today onwards, I'll be a demon king," Chu Feng said calmly. He didn't have much to say to this kind of person. He walked into the distance and left this so-called ruined capital. Not long after, he paid a visit to all the powerful races one by one, including the races left behind by the top 10. Of course, he hurried over in secret to give these evolutionary sects a strong sense of uneasiness. They all felt a great headache because they didn't know why he was visiting them. They were deeply afraid. He was someone who dared to fight to the death with the Yang realm. Even the heavenly deities had died, yet he was still alive. This made everyone feel restraining fear. They all felt their hair stand on end after learning that he was visiting them. There were some orthodoxies who felt extremely guilty. They had once wandered about outside the great abyss and wanted to do some things that couldn't see the light of day. Now, they all felt a chill run down their backs because they were worried that Chu Feng would see through them and pay them back. In reality, they were overthinking things. Chu Feng was only asking and understanding some questions related to the Yang realm. The Yang realm had subdued many evolvers in the primal chaos universe. A portion of them had gone there from the Yin realm in search of the war god's position. A portion of them yielded and followed the people of the Yang realm. They became their subordinates and even slaves before returning to this universe. When Chu Feng fought with the earliest disciples of the Yang realm's great sects, he had used the strange substance in the azure calabash to exterminate them. He had also wiped out many of these saints. He believed that when those people returned, they had sent a message to their clansmen and informed them of some information regarding the Yang realm. Chu Feng came precisely because of this. He wanted to enter the Yang realm, so he naturally had to understand those great sects and investigate the foundations of Taiwu, Hunyi, Yuanshi, and chaotic universe. It was effective and extremely effective. He visited one clan after another. Who wasn't afraid? As expected, they didn't hide anything and told everything they knew to Chu Feng. The Yang realm heavenly deity paid a great price and even had the shadow of a powerful being to open up a stable path that connects the two realms and can maintain it for more than a year? Chu Feng's pupils contracted. This information was extremely important to him. He was originally going to leave, but now that he knew that the path in the Yang realm could still be maintained for a considerable period of time, he changed some of his thoughts. He wanted to go crazy one last time. How could he let them go like this? It was still a long way to go before he rose to power in the Yang realm. He might as well reap the harvest here first. Chu Feng was still alive. This was naturally a shocking piece of news that shocked all parties. Some people were terrified. They had once worn black cloaks and accepted the summons to go to the edge of the universe to meet the people of the Yang realm and provide all kinds of information and materials regarding Chu Feng. Now they were afraid that the news would leak and draw the great demon Chu Feng to massacre them. But after waiting for a long time, they realized that Chu Feng wasn't paying attention to them. Only then did they let out a long sigh. At this moment, Chu Feng had already entered a secret planet that belonged to the damning Pure Land's rule to see his child, the little Taoist. "It's good that you came back alive," an old woman from the damning Pure Land said with a trembling voice. She was smiling but also holding back her tears. She thought of Qin Luoyin when she saw Chu Feng. "Daddy, where are you going?" The little Taoist had an innocent look. He had forgotten everything since he was born and couldn't remember anything now. He was just a child with a pure heart, but he was prematurely intelligent. Chu Feng looked at him and his heart ached. He had lost his mother at such a young age, yet he wasn't a responsible father. He didn't have time to look after him. Recently, he had been struggling and fighting bloody battles. He had left with Qin Luoyin's corpse and only returned now. Even though it wasn't a long time, Chu Feng felt as if he had experienced a century. Recently, every day was a torment of life and death, blood and bones. Daddy is going to slaughter a god and offer sacrifices to some people. Chu Feng couldn't continue speaking. He couldn't tell him that he was going to offer sacrifices to his grandfather, grandmother, mother and uncles. The old woman from the damning Pure Land and that old saint trembled in their hearts when they heard this. They realized that Chu Feng was going to do something incomparably crazy. The little Taoist didn't understand and asked closely, "Where's my mother?" Last time, even though he saw Qin Luoyin covered in blood and unconscious, he was deceived out of kindness in the end. He was told that Qin Luoyin had gone into seclusion to recuperate. In the end, he hadn't walked out of the state of being born. Even though he was prematurely intelligent, he didn't know the truth. That was why he asked such a question. Chu Feng looked at him and couldn't say anything. He only felt sentimental. At this moment, he thought of many things. The little Taoist had once said that he had the qualifications to become a celestial lord in his previous life. It seemed like he wasn't speaking casually. There was indeed something strange about his body. This time, everyone was caught by the Taiwu sect and brought to the vicinity of the Great Abyss. Only the little Taoist was left out. There should be some secrets on his body. Chapter 952. Chu Feng traveled all the way and arrived outside the ancient mine where the demon ancestral cauldron was buried. He stood guard there. There were discussions about him everywhere in the starry sky. The reappearance of the great demon, Chu Feng, caused a great commotion. The Yang Jian celestial lord had died in the abyss, but he had survived. Some people thought that they were on Demon King Chu's must-kill list. Every day felt like a year. They were anxious and fearful as they hid in an uninhabited part of the universe. There were also people who were excited and had heated discussions on Black Blood, Origin Beast, and other platforms. However, all of this had nothing to do with Chu Feng. He did not have the leisure to care about this. He was quietly waiting for the demonic tripod to come out of seclusion. At this moment, there was a small crack in the sea of chaos. No one knew that this was a small path. It was extremely ancient and connected the netherworld cosmos and the broken chaotic cosmos. Now there was someone on the road. Her silver hair hung down to her waist, her figure tall and slender, her back beautiful. She stepped on the secret path she had walked thousands of years ago and approached the front. If Chu Feng were here, he would definitely recognize that this was the woman from the ancient mine at the foot of Mount Kunlun. She used to hide on Earth. After countless years, she shed her skin and was reborn from the dead. At the same time, Yao Yao's grandfather had also looked for her and asked her for medicine to save Yao Yao. This was a woman from the Yang realm who was hiding on Earth. When someone invaded and disturbed her, she once appeared from Kunlun with a pair of silver door panels and killed an illuminator from the underworld universe. Now, she was on her way to the Chaosverse alone. To be more precise, she was smuggling. The world is balanced. The suffering that I have experienced will eventually be compensated in the world of the living. My dynasty, my people, and the Empyreans of my race. You have all been decaying for tens of millions of years. No matter how great and glorious your past was, it will all be forgotten by the people of the world. I will rise and rebuild a flourishing era. Her voice was soft but firm. It was obvious that no ordinary person could destroy such a powerful empire. At the very least, there had to be a heavenly venerable behind the scenes. The silver-haired woman was about to leave. She wanted to use this rare opportunity to return to the world of the living. There would be a wider stage there, and it wouldn't restrict the limits of her growth. The highest point in the netherworld was only the illuminator, and one could see the end of the road at a glance. And her enemy was unimaginably powerful. Only by going to the Yang realm could she soar above the 9 heavens would she have the chance to become a top expert. I'm sorry, some people in the netherworld. I've lived here for many years, but I wasn't able to help you because I want to live. I want to kill my way into the world of the living and shake the foundations of some of the masterminds. She had died back then. She had transformed with her old memories and was just now. It was the best time to enter the Yang realm. People of the Yang realm, you guys have opened up the path. It just so happens that I can borrow it. The will of the heavens allows me to return. Otherwise, she couldn't Yang's way. The way and she could. Was. Back then, the reason she was able to come here was because of an accident. In that extremely powerful battle, the race's Empyrean had broken through the 2 realms before his death. World of realm and world heaven. There was a somber atmosphere in the broken, chaotic universe. Raging waves beat against the shore, and undercurrents surged. The death of a Tao body of the great martial heavenly lord was a gargantuan event. The people who stayed were uneasy. They were afraid that realm would blame them, especially Jiangzhou, Su Hong, and the others. No one went to the Yang realm. They were afraid that realm heaven would blame them, especially Jiangzhou, Su Hong, and the others who had recovered. It was precisely after they fled back that they reported to the great martial heavenly lord that they discovered the ultimate treasure of the Yang realm, causing him to be on his way. The silver-haired woman was called Ming Chuan. She entered the chaotic universe and took out a secret treasure. She lit a broken bronze lamp. Back then, Ming Chuan's clan was able to establish an eternal dynasty and control millions of miles of land. Naturally, they had the support of a heaven lord. Otherwise, how could they occupy a piece of fertile land in the Yang realm? Unfortunately, the clan's heavenly venerate was killed by someone in the end. This doomed the clan's decline. This copper lamp was precisely left behind by that heavenly deity. Even though it was a damaged artifact, after being nurtured for so many years, it could be lit again. This was enough to prove that there was something wrong with it. It could protect her as she passed through this trial. Ming Chuan didn't dare to activate it in the Yang realm. She was afraid of being swallowed by the abyss. Once she entered the Yang realm, she didn't have to worry about being divined by the divine masters. In the Yang realm, the order of heaven and earth was perfect. The great Tao was vast and grand. No one could divinate the mysteries of heaven, especially those with peerless ancient weapons. They could disturb the weather, making it even more difficult to be divined. The old weasel had said this to Chu Feng. He dared to attack in the Yang realm, but he didn't dare to act so recklessly in the Yang realm. That was because the Yang realm was broken. In their eyes, it was just a narrow space. It wasn't a truly orderly world. They even suspected that the world Chu Feng and the others were in wasn't the real Yang realm. On this day, a flame burned. A silver-haired woman rushed over on the small path that connected the chaotic universe and the Yang realm. Along the way, people were awakened and hurriedly tried to stop her. In the end, they were turned to ashes. This small path was extremely dangerous. Complete chaotic lightning streaked past from time to time. Some were as red as blood and some were silver. It was enough to kill a divine king. It was too terrifying. The silver-haired woman was scared but not hurt. She followed this small path and rushed to the other shore she wanted to reach. Under the gentle light of the green lamp, she forcefully crossed over. That day, the disciples of the few sects were shaken. The chaotic universe was in an uproar. The celestial venerable had just died, but someone killed their people without the slightest scruple and sneaked into the Yang realm. In this battle, one of the gods died. He was burned to ashes by the celestial venerable's fire lamp. The death substitution talisman exploded. Because the difference in level wasn't small, it wasn't effective. The number of illuminators that died exceeded the number of fingers on two hands. As for some of the younger disciples, they were even more miserable. They didn't even have time to groan before a batch of them died. In the chaotic universe, the Taiwu, Hunyi, Yuanshi, and chaotic universe were shaken. This time, they were caught unprepared. However, it also exposed the problem of their carelessness. In particular, the main gods followed the Taiwu to the Yang realm and died one after another. There weren't many gods left, and there was only one person overseeing the path. Chase. I don't believe she can pass through the boundary membrane of the Yang realm. Jiang Zhou and Su Hongda roared. At the same time, their faces turned pale. This could be considered their most serious dereliction of duty. Letting a creature from this universe enter the Yang realm could be a big or small matter. If someone really targeted them, it would definitely be a great crime. In the end, they were disappointed. They didn't catch up. Ming Chuan used the green lamp to launch the strongest attack. She passed through the boundary membrane and successfully broke into the Yang realm. I'm back. She carried the awakened celestial venerable's ancient lamp. Her beautiful face was full of excitement as she breathed in large mouthfuls of abundant yang qi. From now on, she could leap freely in the sea and fly freely in the sky. She disappeared in an instant. She would conceal her identity and quietly wait for her rise. A cloud of gray fog appeared at the boundary membrane of the Yang realm. With a whoosh, it also charged through the gap that hadn't closed yet. It let out a cold laugh that made one's hair stand on end. In the end, it disappeared between heaven and earth. She's Empress Ming Chuan. In the chaotic universe, the old weasel screamed. It divined and deduced who Ming Chuan was through the traces left behind by her. Back then, she was the last empress of that dynasty in the underworld ridge zone? Jiang Zhou sucked in a breath of cold air. That was an old matter from tens of millions of years ago. Young Empress Ming Chuan's talent was exceptional. In the vast Yang realm, she was considered a super genius and ranked at the peak. Unfortunately, her fate wasn't good. She became the last empress of that dynasty. Moreover, she was hastily elected after the old emperor died, and there was no one to inherit the throne. At that time, the dynasty was about to collapse and the clan was about to be exterminated. She was far from mature. Many people knew about that period of history. A dynasty supported by a celestial venerable was destroyed. The mastermind behind the scenes was terrifying to death. It was suspected that more than one celestial venerable intervened. In the Een realm universe, the place where the machine race's ancient Vajra ancestor was once buried erupted with splendor and auspicious multicolored light. The demon ancestral cauldron rushed out and repaired itself. The demon cauldron had completely absorbed the Star Mother gold bracelet, the rarest and most precious material in the world. It fused into one, and specks of patterns appeared on the cauldron's walls. "You've recovered?" Chu Feng asked. He had been sitting here for several days. "Relying on the mother gold you gave me, I've improved even more." The demon ancestral cauldron was grateful from the bottom of its heart. Where was he going next? What was he going to do? The demon ancestral cauldron asked him. Return to Earth first, said Chufeng. Okay. With the demon ancestral cauldron by his side, he didn't need to use the teleportation domains on some planet. He could directly pierce through heaven and earth and cross the Yin realm's starry sea in an instant. It definitely wouldn't work in the Yang realm. The order of heaven and earth was complete, and the backlash of the laws would make even the gods tremble. Before long, they arrived in outer space and looked down at the land flourishing with life below. I see that you're deeply worried. What's on your mind? Asked the demon ancestral cauldron. Chufeng was very solemn as he said, I'm going to do something big and go crazy for once. But before that, I need to resolve my worries and fulfill a promise. The demon ancestral cauldron was silent. What worries did the current Chufeng have? The people around him had all died. He was alone and extremely miserable. What are you going to do? Asked the demon ancestral cauldron. Before going crazy, I want to ensure that I can see my parents, Luoyin and Yellow Cattle one last time. I want to resolve all my hidden worries. The demon ancestral cauldron was stunned. Chapter 953. In the purgatory, Chufeng had come again. It was pitch black and boundless. This area was like a part of the void of the universe that had been cut off. Regardless of whether it was high or low in the sky, there were some meteorites floating in an irregular arrangement. This old demon is scared. I don't want to die yet. The demon ancestral cauldron was almost stuttering. It never would have thought that Chufeng would bring it here. What is this place? The netherworld universe was a place that no one dared to mess with. If there was nothing to do, they would hide as far away as they could. Who would dare to come in and be impudent? However, Chufeng came, moreover carrying hope and longing. His eyes carried a mysterious brilliance, as if he was searching for the path to immortality. Demon Cauldron couldn't help but seriously remind him. Back then, even Demon Ancestor withdrew not long after entering. His expression was unpleasant, because he sensed an indescribable great terror. The Demon Ancestor was a creature that had broken through the limits of this universe. It was on par with the strongest expert in the prehistoric era, the Dragon Ancestor. Even he was afraid. The demonic ancestor once said that the more powerful one is, the more one would revere this place. Chufeng glanced at it and naturally understood that it was reminding him that he was not strong enough. The ignorant were fearless. Just follow me. I've told you before that I've walked this path before. Seeing how calm Chufeng was, Demonic Cauldron really had nothing to say. Not long after, they arrived at the Radiant Ghost City. Even though it was not his first time here, Chufeng was still exceptionally cautious and solemn. The radiant city of death illuminated the dark purgatory, making this region shine brilliantly. It was majestic and tall, ancient and full of vicissitudes, as if it had existed for millions and millions of years. Outside the city, there were corpses everywhere, ranging from golden arhats to beings of higher realms. There were void rats, golden-winged celestial rocks, bug kings, immortal birds. There were many races. Whoosh! Chufeng quickly climbed up the ghost city. Standing here, the scene in the city was even more shocking, making even the demonic cauldron tremble, feeling waves of uneasiness. In the city, there was a sea of corpses piled up from the ground to the top of the city walls. The most terrifying thing was the shockingly huge millstone. It occupied a third of the ghost town's area and slowly rotated, crushing the corpses that landed on it into a bloody paste. Soon after, the corpses in the city were all gone, disappearing into the millstone. Blood splashed everywhere, bloody mud flowing everywhere. Very quickly, a sea of corpses fell from the endless void, filling up the radiant city of death once again. Chufeng once suspected that these corpses were gathered here after the people of the underworld died, but now it seemed that this was not the case at all. His strength was no longer the same as it was in the past. Now that he could move freely in the starry sea of the netherworld universe, he didn't notice the abnormal phenomenon of a large number of corpses disappearing. He seriously suspected that in some terrifying world, there were indescribable passageways, or some unfathomable creature that interfered with everything, sending over a sea of corpses from other realms to maintain everything. Perhaps it is some indescribable natural law that goes round and round, carrying out all of this. Chu Feng sighed again, guessing like this. He had come here more than once, studying this city. It felt too ancient, always feeling like this place had existed for hundreds of millions of years, just too long. Who could live for so long? Even the celestial venerables should have died a long time ago. Even the powerhouses that didn't come into being in the Yang realm should have dried up and died. Since no creature could live for so long, then it could only be a kind of instinctive law of heaven and earth. Is this the reincarnation land of innate existence? The demonic ancestral cauldron asked. Chu Feng sighed and said, some people guessed that this was arranged by someone and not naturally formed by heaven and earth. But who could live for so long, exceeding hundreds of millions of years? Who could silently look down on all life, watching as the creatures of the universe grew old and died? Some of these words were said by the old foxes of the foreign realm. Even such figures were afraid of everything in purgatory. They had once warned Chu Feng not to say too much and not to mention it again. The more powerful one was, the more they feared this place. Chu Feng calmed down. The reason he came here was because he already had no other choice. He wanted to make one last effort. The demonic ancestral cauldron carried the bloody mist of Chu Feng's parents, Yellow Cattle, Big Black Yak, and the others. Meanwhile, the stone box directly stored Qin Luoyin's corpse. After a long period of silence, Chu Feng decided to give it a try. He would use the stone box to bring everyone to the end of the reincarnation path and beg the clay idol to save him. I know I might be overestimating my abilities and shouldn't have alarmed that kind of existence, but I really don't have any other way out. I only want them to come back to life. Chu Feng spoke and invited the demonic ancestral cauldron into the stone box. However, he was disappointed as soon as he was about to enter the city of death. Just like last time, the stone box didn't protect those people and was going to expel them. It wanted to throw them into the city. Chu Feng broke out in cold sweat. How could it be like this? Now everyone was placed into the stone box. It wasn't like last time when the space inside the stone box hadn't been opened and Qin Luoyin's corpse couldn't be placed inside. The reality was very cruel. He still couldn't bring these people across. For a moment, Chu Feng was lost in thought. Could it be that he only had one last path to try? But he really wasn't resigned to it. I'll send you out. Wait for me. Chu Feng brought along the demonic ancestral cauldron and rushed out of the purgatory with extreme speed. After that, he used the soul bell to fix Qin Luoyin's corpse in place. He also moved out the stone box and handed it over to the demonic ancestral cauldron to guard. He set off alone and went to the end of the reincarnation path. He disregarded everything and went to see the clay idol to carry out his final effort and attempt. This time, his speed was very fast. With the little Taoist's black talisman in hand, he soared into the sky and could fly. He wasn't like before when he could only travel on foot. Even so, it still took Chu Feng several days to complete a round trip. He really borrowed the path from the radiant city of death and went to the end of the reincarnation path. But when he returned, he was dazed out of his wits and returned without accomplishing anything. He saw the clay idol, but the other party didn't give him any response. It was just a clay idol. After returning, he sat in Kunlun for a day and a night. In the end, he got up and said, I knew it would be like this, but I won't be resigned to it if I don't try my best. In fact, after experiencing a near-death calamity, Chu Feng had experienced the power of the extreme martial realm in the Great Abyss, as well as the celestial venerable's most crucial callousness and ruthlessness. He had a feeling that the further one walked on the path of evolution, the more apathetic the ultimate evolvers would be when they had nowhere else to go. When that kind of existence evolved to a later stage, they were almost like the great Tao that the ancient sages spoke of. They looked down on all living things without joy, worry, or emotion. What kind of person was he, and what kind of existence was the clay idol? They couldn't be mentioned in the same breath at all. How could that kind of existence pay attention to him and respond to him? But he wasn't resigned to it. He cared too much and couldn't bear to part with his parents and friends. That was why he tried and worked hard. Even though he was extremely disappointed to return without accomplishing anything, it wasn't unexpected. Chu Feng knew that when he first saw the clay idol, he could only be said to be fearless because he was ignorant. If that clay idol really was a living creature, then his previous boldness, sitting on the same platform as it really was too much. Meanwhile, if the clay idol was still alive and had perception, perhaps it would only treat him like a bug that landed at its side, not willing to pay him any attention. The more he thought about it, the more terrifying it became. Chu Feng went to that fox that was about to be completely petrified, yet even it felt reverence towards the path of reincarnation, not daring to mention the clay idol too much. Just how terrifying was this? We finally reached this step. He carried sadness. There was only one path left. He was extremely clear-headed, recognizing reality. Those hopes he placed on others couldn't be relied on in the end. By doing that, he walked the path of reincarnation again, all because he wasn't willing to give up, grabbing all possibilities. "Let's head to Radiant City of Death again," Chu Feng said. The demonic ancestral cauldron followed him, entering the purgatory again and approaching the Radiant City of Death. Our world is full of suffering like a gloomy cage. The people of the Yang realm call it a cemetery, a mass grave. Even though it makes one feel unhappy and angry, there is also a bit of reason. Let's break away from this place. I hope you all can reincarnate into the Yang realm, and we will meet again in the Yang realm. Chu Feng was extremely emotional. This was his final hope. He was extremely tired, and there really wasn't any other way. This was the only path he could take. I believe that your true spirits still exist and haven't completely disappeared. Chu Feng spoke. If those people's true spirits already no longer existed, then he would truly feel all hope turn to dust and despair. He knew that one more day of delay meant one more risk. If the bloody mist within the demonic ancestral cauldron dissipated as time went on, then perhaps there really wouldn't be any hope left. He wanted to give it a try and send them to the afterlife. In the end, Chu Feng held onto the black talisman, the stone box, and Qin Luoyin. Moreover, he let the demonic ancestral cauldron pour out the bloody mist and the energy substance after the soul light's decomposition. He wanted to personally protect and send them off. In reality, after approaching the ghost town, the stone box no longer paid attention to the bloody mist and corpses. It only emitted a weak and sparkling luster on Chu Feng's body. Chu Feng was incomparably nervous. He placed the black talisman beside the bloody mist, energy substance, and Qin Luoyin. He followed them forward and finally entered the stone millstone. Aoo! In a split second, a mournful howl came from the originally quiet place. It broke the eternal tranquility and made Chu Feng's scalp go numb. His body was ice-cold, as if there was a corpse lying on his back. It was as if a malicious spirit was crouching on his back. Aoo! It wasn't just one sound. Too many howls rang out around Chu Feng from within the bloody mist. He saw one terrifying creature after another. They were too malevolent. Those weren't his parents, Yellow Cattle, Qin Luoyin, and the others, but something else. They were too terrifying as they screamed and roared loudly. These bizarre creatures seemed to have surpassed malicious spirits and represented the extreme danger. What was this? Chu Feng was convinced that this wasn't seeping out from the crushed corpses but from the bloody mist in the demonic cauldron. It was also coming from Qin Luoyin's surroundings. Chu Feng felt as if he had fallen into an icehouse. His body was bone-piercingly cold. Why was this happening? The huge stone millstone rotated slowly. It was incomparably coarse as the corpses in the surroundings shattered and turned into a bloody paste. The scene was terrifying. At this time, a row of golden runes on the millstone shone brightly and pierced Chu Feng's eyes with pain. The beam of light illuminated the area, causing his parents, Yellow Cattle, and the others to let out malicious spirits' wails. The scene was even more miserable. Chu Feng felt as if his scalp was about to explode. But it was also at this time that he was astonished and overjoyed. He almost shouted out loud. He saw a few familiar faces. They were very faint as they emerged from the bloody mist. There were his parents, Big Black, Yellow Cattle, and the others. They were almost transparent and so faint that they almost didn't exist. At the same time, the mournful cries were still there. They gradually became visible in the rough millstone's golden beam of light. Those were wisps of gray mist. Chu Feng understood everything in a split second. Those so-called wails and malicious spirits' cries were actually the strange foreign substance entangling these people's bodies. He drew in a breath of cold air. They had already restrained themselves during those years in the foreign land. In the end, they didn't cultivate mutant techniques, but in the end, they were still entangled with these terrifying things. If they hadn't personally come here to experience reincarnation, they probably wouldn't have understood how terrifying they were until they died. It was too horrifying. Chu Feng's head was as big as a bucket. He had to experience reincarnation. This was really too terrifying. I'm suffocating to death. At this time, Big Black Yak's weak and almost transparent soul light actually let out a voice. It was very weak and small. Chapter 954. I'm dying of suffocation, I'm dying of suffocation. Why do I feel like I've fallen into a dead sleep, trapped in a nightmare that I can never wake up from? Finally I can speak. After Big Black Yak opened his mouth, even though he was in a weak soul-light state, he made an action of gasping for breath, as though he was a drowning person who had been saved. Pooh! Ouyang Feng spat out his saliva out of habit, but in the end, he spat out a wisp of soul light. His body became increasingly faint and almost dissipated. He was so frightened that he let out a strange cry and did his best to suck in his saliva. Old Donkey was in a daze. He touched the saliva that had been spat on his face. When he came back to his senses, he immediately fought with the Ouyang mythological beast and shouted, "Hee-haw! Hee-haw, mythological beast, Grandpa Donkey will fight it out with you." The two of them were fighting. Yellow Cattle, Zhou Quan, and the Manchurian Tiger had all revived. One after another, familiar faces appeared before his eyes. Chu Feng was so excited that his body was trembling. His hopes had finally come true. These people had reappeared. Not long ago, he was still worried that this path would end in vain, and he would fall into complete despair. After all, only a bloody mist was left of these people. Their soul light had disappeared, and they had been decomposed into energy matter. Their entire imprint in this world had completely disappeared. However, he still firmly believed that the so-called true spirit, the core of a person's consciousness, should still be there, hidden in that energy substance, even though he couldn't sense it. Now everything was in its best form. Roar, in the surroundings, a mournful cry pulled everyone back to reality. The stone millstone flickered with golden symbols as it obliterated the gray substance. All kinds of terrifying figures appeared, extremely terrifying. Old Donkey couldn't be bothered to quarrel with Divine Beast Ouyang, and the Black Yak also shut up. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts as they stood there quietly, watching everything in astonishment. Chu Feng was shaken. He saw many species appearing from the gray matter. There was a 6-winged sky dragon with blood dripping from its eyes, a 3-legged immortal bird with a pitch-black body and no holy aura to speak of, and a golden-winged roc with an evil aura and a venomous look in its eyes. Then, their bodies changed again. After exploding, they turned into gray matter, and then they reassembled again. Some of them turned into ancient figures that wore heavenly deity robes, and some of them turned into mysterious statues that sat high up in the 9 heavens. However, their eyes were all dripping with blood, or evil energy overflowed into the heavens. They were sinister and sinister, extremely abnormal. Bang! Within the golden light, they exploded again. The gray matter surged, not willing to be obliterated, struggling intensely. As the celestial Dharch, I shall rule the world. As the gray mist churned, a figure appeared, sitting cross-legged on a prayer mat. He was surrounded by all sorts of prostrating figures, all of whom were prostrating themselves in worship. However, the eyes of the figure sitting on the prayer mat were also dripping with blood, and the bodies of those who were prostrating themselves were covered with wounds and black blood. Boom! On the millstone, the golden runes flew out and directly pressed down, turning into a huge golden hand, grinding the figure on the praying mat and the creatures of the various races to pieces. Roar, mournful howls rang out. The gray mist churned and turned into all sorts of faces that cried out in pain. They were incomparably malevolent, and their eyes were cold as they stared at Chu Feng and the others. They seemed to be unconvinced by the millstone. Unfortunately, it still broke apart, crushed until it vanished into thin air, no longer existing. What is this thing? What is its origin? After making a trip to the other side, they actually came into contact with this type of extremely heaven-defying substance, making everyone shiver with fear, feeling horrified. If he hadn't come here, Chu Feng wouldn't have known that the consequences would be so serious. Everyone seemed to be shouldering the weight of a malicious spirit. It was too terrifying. Was that a type of creature, a strange substance, or some kind of evil curse law? Chu Feng punched the black yak, yellow cattle, Zhou Quan, and Ouyang Feng one after another. Then, he arrived at his parents' side. These two were actually infected by the gray substance just now because they came into contact with the bloody mist. Dad, Mom. Chu Feng's voice trembled slightly. He originally thought he would never see them again in this life, but who would have thought that he would succeed here and rescue these people from the bloody mist and energy substance? Child. Little Feng. Chu Ziyuan and Wang Jing were both trembling slightly as they recalled the last moments of their lives. They had some guesses and knew that this was the meeting between life and death. Brother, where are we? The black yak asked. The group of people had endless things to say, but they were also very curious. Purgatory, city of death, under the millstone. Chu Feng informed and briefly explained the general situation. Everyone was stunned. They had come to the side of the reincarnation path, and were going to be formatted, and be reborn from then on? They were truly courageous. After they found out what Chu Feng had done, their feelings were complicated. They were touched, disappointed, and nostalgic. It turned out that they had already reached the end of this life, and were now truly dead. If it wasn't for Chu Feng, even their soul light would have been extinguished. Chu Feng supported Chu Ziyuan and Wang Jing and looked at this group of people. His pupils contracted and he felt a wave of discomfort in his heart. After all, some great demons were missing and some people had completely disappeared. The Kongdong mountain tortoise was gone, the black bear king had also completely disappeared, and the golden-winged rock king was nowhere to be seen. The big baldy horse king's shadow emerged with difficulty from the energy substance after a bit of broken soul disintegrated and was almost completely obliterated. Wu Qifeng and the old lama also struggled out at the last moment. This was related to the amount of energy substance preserved after the soul light disintegrated. There was a period of silence as everyone lamented. There would never be a perfect thing in this world. This time, they gave Chu Feng endless hope. He thought it was perfect, but in the end, it was still incomplete and there was great regret. In addition, Qin Luoyin hadn't appeared yet. She had always been at Chu Feng's side. His corpse was still there, and presumably, his true spirit was trapped inside. "Brother, are we going to reincarnate?" the Black Yak asked. Their feelings were complicated. There was reluctance and also gloominess. They had been easily obliterated, and they didn't even have the hope to take revenge. They had to rush to an unknown afterlife. "It's no big deal. We'll fight again in the next life." Yellow Cattle was very resolute. He wasn't dejected but had a kind of conviction. Some blood splattered in the surroundings. Whether it was Chu Feng's parents or Yellow Cattle and Zhouquan, they were all very uncomfortable. It made them feel dizzy and want to retch. What was around them? There was a silver-striped crocodile dragon that was crushed into pieces. Broken bones and blood splattered in all directions. There was an ant that was as big as a wild elephant disintegrated and black juices flowed out. There was a palm-sized metallic man that exploded and turned into metal powder. There was a viscous scarlet liquid around them, as if they had sunk into tomato sauce, but they all knew what it was. At the same time, they were also gathering toward the center. They were about to receive the final obliteration and be sent onto the road of reincarnation. In reality, their place was very abnormal. First, there was a strange substance, and then there was the stone box's protection. Only then could they avoid being crushed. But now, it was no longer possible. Apart from the living Chu Feng, the stone box no longer protected them. Moreover, a row of golden runes on the course and enormous stone millstone lit up and began to target everyone. They didn't know why, but they thought of the words, "Heaven's net has a long reach." Naturally, they weren't vicious and evil people. It was just that it seemed very difficult if they wanted to sneak over. Will we forget everything? From then on, we won't know where we came from, and we won't know who we are. We'll be reborn in a strange world. Chu Feng's mother, Wang Jing, pulled his hand. Her face was full of pain and sorrow. She wasn't willing to leave. She couldn't part with this place, and she couldn't put her mind at ease with Chu Feng. "Mom!" Chu Feng supported her. Even though his heart ached, he told her that he would think of a way to make them remember everything and not forget this life. "I don't want to forget this life either. I still want to drink big bowls of wine and eat big chunks of meat together. We'll chase after the enemy together. I haven't even taken revenge for this life, so how can I be willing?" Ouyang Feng shouted. "We'll still be good brothers in our next lives." Chu Feng looked at them and consoled them. He solemnly told them that he would strive to let them reincarnate with their wisdom. The moment that should come had still come. Chu Feng made them gather together and guard the black talisman paper together, and at this time, Qin Luoyin had also left the range of Chu Feng's stone box and was together with Chu Feng's parents. Boom! The millstone crushed over and Qin Luoyin's soul light emerged. She and Chu Feng looked at each other. There were too many things they wanted to talk about and her eyes were filled with tears of the soul. Chu Feng's voice was trembling. He felt sorry for Qin Luoyin. He didn't protect her well and made her abandon her child. She was reincarnated alone like this. His heart was desolate and he didn't know what the road ahead was like. He told her everything with the most concise words and promised that he would look for her in his next life. Qin Luoyin looked back with too many regret. She was looking at Chu Feng as if she was looking at the Yin Realm universe for the last time. Boom! Golden light erupted as the coarse millstone crushed over. It was as if it was formatting everyone and wanted to cut down everything in this world. The black talisman paper glowed and floated up and down among everyone. Pop! Everyone's soul light was lightly trembling and a wisp of gray matter floated out from each of them. It was forced out from the soul light of Yellow Cattle and the others. Chu Feng's body was ice cold as he felt a chill. This gray matter was too troublesome to deal with. As expected, it was even tangling with the soul light. Even though he had anticipated that there might be remnants and believed that they needed to be completely reincarnated, he still felt a lingering fear after witnessing it with his own eyes. At the same time, he also thought about himself. Just how much of this strange matter was inside his body and soul light? In the end, everyone fell out of the millstone and stepped onto the reincarnation path. At this moment, they were temporarily muddled and forgot everything. Even if they had the black talisman paper, it wouldn't do. Back then, the little Taoist had only awakened when he reached the end of reincarnation. These people would also be the same. Chu Feng personally escorted them and activated the black talisman paper. He brought everyone along and hurried on at top speed to ensure that no accidents would happen to them. Along the way, he saw those ancient soldiers whose flesh and blood were almost rotten and shriveled up. They were all carrying standard reincarnation blades on their backs, and their scabbards were rotten. This time, he didn't stop and didn't want to take this kind of blade again. They finally arrived. An enormous black abyss lay across this place and cut off the path ahead. Countless creatures threw themselves forward and fell into the darkness like dumplings. No matter how powerful you were when you were alive, you still couldn't fly into the sky or burrow into the earth. You could only pounce and leap like a wild beast here. Let's go. Chu Feng brought everyone along and used the black talisman paper to cross this abyss. They arrived at the other side. There was a railing here and an ancient cave. There was also an ancient clay idol sitting cross-legged quietly as it guarded the end of the reincarnation path. When they arrived here, everyone felt as if they were in a dream as they gradually recovered. However, they still lost a portion of their memories. Fortunately, it wasn't considered serious. Chu Feng's heart sank. He knew that this should be because there were too few talisman papers. With so many people sharing them, there was definitely something lacking. Chu Feng's father shed tears of his soul during the final farewell, so there was no need to talk about his mother. She was going to be separated by life and death from her own child. They were separated by a lifetime and reincarnation. In the next life, you guys will still be my parents. Chu Feng's lips trembled, feeling great pain in his heart, unable to endure it. However, right now, there really was nothing he could do. Chu Ziyuan calmed down and said, "Don't set up all kinds of problems for yourself. I know that it's already very difficult for you to send us here. Whether it's the injuries or the hardships of this life, it's all just an experience. It's time to end it. We should leave freely and not take anything from this life with us. In this life, you are our child. Familial love is eternal, and it will illuminate this life. Our experiences have been wonderful, and after this journey, everything will be fixed here. Let's be free and easy on our way. Let's not be sad. Perhaps that's even better. Let's experience something new and exciting. There's no need to be reluctant, and there's no need to feel pain." His open-minded attitude in the end made Chu Feng's heart ache even more. Wang Jing cried there with tears of her soul and said, "Child, as long as you can live well, we can let go of everything. You are our son in this life, and we are already very satisfied. Your father is right. Let go of everything now, and we should leave calmly to experience new splendor. You don't have to bear any burdens." Big Black Yak, Yellow Cattle, Ouyang Feng, Old Donkey, and the others all came over. They were reluctant to part and were filled with sadness. There was also Qin Luoyin, who looked at Chu Feng with her soul light trembling and tears flowing. In the end, she told him to take good care of the little Taoist. "Don't be like this. All of you will have your innate wisdom. I will definitely go to the Yang realm to find all of you," Chu Feng said in a low voice. After that, he made everyone light up the black talisman papers together so that they could worship the clay idol together. "Will all of us appear in the Yang realm?" Yellow Cattle asked. "We should." Chu Feng nodded. He had communicated with the little Taoist before. Normally, the little Taoist would appear in the Yang realm, but he was ambushed by Chu Feng and the talisman paper was snatched away. Those who held the talisman paper would have a very high cultivation starting point in their next life. At this moment, Chu Feng began to recite scriptures. They were all the most powerful breathing technique. There were those from the deity race, the Buddhist race, the quasi-immortal race, and also the robbery induction breathing technique. He hoped that they would be able to preserve their memories and use these inheritances to quickly rise up in their next life. These techniques were only up to the Illuminator realm, but these were enough. They were stunning enough when they were young. After they had their hair cut and their marrow cleansed, there would definitely be ancient and powerful orthodoxies in the Yang realm willing to accept them as disciples. However, Chu Feng also knew that there was only one talisman paper. It was simply too little and couldn't protect everyone completely. These people already had some incomplete memories after walking for such a distance. Perhaps they would lose a lot of their memories when they truly went to reincarnation. I hope all of you can remember part of the scriptures. Chu Feng could only hope like this. These people went on their way and entered the ancient cave to truly go to the afterlife. There was still a small section of the black talisman paper that hadn't burned out. Chu Feng picked it up because he still needed to cross the abyss and return to the Yang realm. Chu Feng took out the diamond chakram. Back then, he had shared the offerings with the clay idol here. Those mysterious people who had gone to the afterlife had ignited the talisman paper in worship. Glowing veined patterns appeared and twined around his diamond chakram. Now, he activated the diamond chakram and tried to ignite it with his soul flame. As expected, threads of glowing runes appeared. He took the remaining small section of the black talisman paper and wanted to use it as compensation to further increase everyone's offerings. He was afraid that they wouldn't have enough. Goodbye, Chu Feng said as he gazed at the reincarnation cave. If there's a next life, we'll still be brothers. The black yak, yellow cattle, and the others roared in the cave. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.